He's immensely seductive. Quite sure he's right. Obsessionally neurotic. Pretty dangerous, in fact.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
Do you mean you doubt your powers to convince him?
Say it! Say it!
All right, I'll say it.
Worse than that. What I'm afraid of is his power to convince me.
We're talking about putting a manifestly irresponsible man on national television.
Sweetheart, be reasonable.
What? This is the end game.
I mean, as long as you're reasonable. You have to be reasonable. We have to be reasonable. Thank you very much.
You don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do.
Chris, please explain to the normie we need to finish what we've started.
All right, everybody. It is Friday, June 20th. My dog waited for the perfect moment. It is Friday, June 27th, 2025, the 159th day of the Golden Age. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. There is way too much to get to, so I'm probably not going to get to it all. And we'll do a nice long show. We're going to try to get it all in, but there's no way that's going to happen. And we are just going to have to be okay with that and take comfort in the fact that most of it has no possibility for impacting our lives. Okay, so let's get started with the Supreme Court. Today was their last official day of this term, although they are going to be releasing some decisions next week. There is, I think next week on Thursday, they're figuring out what to do or announcing what they figured out to do with all of the cases that are going to be affected by the biggest decision of the day. And that is this one. This is NBC News. Supreme Court curbs injunctions that blocked Trump's birthright citizenship plan. So we talked about this a few weeks back when it was argued in some substantial depth. I listened to the full, 2.5 hours worth of arguments in this case. The headline is birthright citizenship, and that's what we're seeing over and over again. But the substance of this decision was about whether or not the lower courts could hands down nationwide injunctions and thereby tie the hands of the executive. So let's go through some of this. The Supreme Court on Friday handed a major win to the Trump administration by allowing it, for now, to take steps to implement its proposal to end automatic birthright citizenship. In a 6-3 vote, the court granted a request by the Trump administration to narrow the scope of nationwide injunctions imposed by judges so that they apply only to states, groups, and individuals that sued. So it would limit the scope of their decision. If someone brought a case, the court could still decide that that the administration was not able to enforce its policy against that person, but it doesn't mean that they get to shut down all of the cases throughout the country and all of the potential cases, the cases that wouldn't even be brought, and tie the hands of the executive. That means the birthright citizenship proposal can likely move forward, at least in part, although the specifics remain to be seen and it could still be blocked by courts on other grounds. The ruling immediately sparked a response from plaintiffs who have sued to block the executive order, with their lawyers vowing to continue the legal fight. Within hours of the ruling, one group of plaintiffs filed an amended lawsuit, and the American Civil Liberties Union filed a new class action lawsuit. It has long been widely accepted, including by legal scholars on the left and right, that the Constitution's 14th Amendment confers automatic citizenship to almost anyone born in the United States. And they go on to talk about the fact that the merits of that were not considered in this case at all. It was really only the argument about the nationwide injunctions. As for the 14th Amendment, we've talked about that at long length on this show over the last couple of years. I would refer everyone. I think it's just a book worth reading. Our Secret Constitution by George P. Fletcher, globalist, leftist, Zionist, Columbia University law professor, who wrote that the Civil War was fought specifically to invert and overthrow the original Constitution, replacing a republic with a democracy, the focus being moved from the individual and the individual's rights to the equality of all people, and the focus then being on the good of the nation rather than preserving the rights of its citizens. It is an eye-opening book, and I would suggest, in addition to the fact that we know the Reconstruction was an intentional inversion of the Constitution for which the commies are proud, and the globalists and the regime, you understand. In addition to that, there's also great questions about the ratification process during that time anyhow. They went and held legislatures at gunpoint in order to ratify within the states, and they prevented the southern states from even participating. So they basically just instituted constitutional amendments going around the proper process. All of that at some point has to be undone. If it has to be chipped away piece by piece with things like birthright citizenship, then so be it. That's fine. It might be the best, in terms of stability, the best way to overturn all of this. And, that is a value judgment. There are trade-offs there. Most of our legal system rests on the 14th Amendment at this point. So the amount that's going to go away if the 14th Amendment were to be overturned would be massive. And maybe it's just the correct decision to do that all at once, let the consequences be what they may, and adapt as we go along. Or maybe they're doing it and intend to do it in this stepwise fashion that will deal with one issue at a time, kind of letting the air out of the balloon more slowly rather than just popping the thing. And that pattern seems to be the case in a lot of what we observe and have observed over the last 10 years, but specifically the last 5, and the approach of the Trump administration and the broader Trump team and whoever else is on that side of the effort. Let's go to some of the reaction before we get into the decision. This is from the Mark Elias group, Democracy Docket. And I'm pulling this up specifically because Mark Elias, in addition to Norm Eisen, I consider those guys somewhat equivalent in their operation of the lawfare apparatus against the Trump administration, against the American people, for the benefit of the global regime. Norm Eisen is the guy who writes the Democracy Playbook, the script for color revolutions worldwide. He was also the one at the Brookings Institute who was responsible for the white papers that led to all of the Trump indictments, the Trump impeachments, and the rest of it. Mark Elias, of course, is the Democrat lawfare attorney when it comes to handling election lawsuits. He was also at Perkins Coie when Perkins Coie was involved in the Clinton Russian collusion hoax and scandal. So this is Democracy Docket. SCOTUS limits federal judges' ability to block executive actions nationwide. The ruling is an existential threat to the rule of law, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson noted in a dissent. Not long after the ruling, Trump claimed that his administration was now free to move ahead in amassing power on a range of fronts. Nationwide or universal injunctions prevent the government from enforcing a law, regulation, or policy across the entire U.S., not just against the specific parties involved in the lawsuit, and not just in the districts where they're issued. In a majority opinion written by Justice Amy Coney Barrett, the court wrote that nationwide injunctions, quote, likely exceed the equitable authority that Congress has given to the federal courts. The bottom line, the universal injunction was conspicuously non-existent for most of our nation's history, Barrett wrote. And the point in that first remark there is that the district courts, it's not their responsibility to provide a check on the executive branch of the federal government. The Supreme Court can do that, but the Supreme Court is what decides the constitutionality of any policy that might be put forward by the executive branch. And again, there's no enforcement mechanism. So even if the Supreme Court decides against the executive branch, it's not like they can stop the executive branch. The executive branch just by custom usually respects the decision of the court. But all of that relies on notions of judicial supremacy and judicial review that were not part of the original Constitution. Judicial review was put in place by the judiciary in Marbury versus Madison. Back to the article. Friday's decision over Trump's executive order aiming to deny citizenship to children who are born on U.S. soil to parents who are in the country illegally or temporarily. His order directly challenged the 14th Amendment, which states that everyone born on U.S. territory is a citizen regardless of their descent. And that is not exactly true. That's how they state it, but that's not exactly true. And I think that that'll be overturned, as I'm sure most of you think that'll be overturned. The court's ruling does not address the underlying constitutionality and merits of Trump's order. It instead stayed nationwide injunctions issued by federal judges in Maryland, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. Let's get down to, all right, here we go. The lower court rulings, while now limited, remain in effect, and additional plaintiffs will still be allowed to sue the Trump administration over the birthright citizenship order and other actions. Attorney General Pam Bondi said the Supreme Court will likely decide the merits of Trump's birthright citizenship order during its next session, which begins in October. So there's going to be a long adjustment period on that one. Down to the end. In a statement, the Center for American Progress, another left-wing think tank, said the ruling rubber stamps President Donald Trump's efforts to undermine our nation's rule of law. It upends the very function of the Constitution and cedes unmeasured power to a president who chooses to act unconstitutionally. That is pretty incredible. And I'm meaning incredible in its literal way. There is no credibility to that statement. That is ridiculous. Nationwide injunctions have grown more common over recent decades and have been sought by both liberal and conservatives to halt the policies of presidents of both parties. Legal experts across the ideological spectrum have expressed concerns about the use of nationwide injunctions, saying they promote forum shopping and the politicization of the judiciary. Other experts say they are necessary in rare cases to protect civil liberties throughout the country and avoid a patchwork of conflicting judicial rulings. Well, good luck, homies. I don't think you're going to have that option on the table anymore. But of course, they are already working on workarounds. Let's get into the decision itself a little bit here. I want to make sure that this is actually visible for people and get down to the right page here. All right. So I just want to read the ending of Barrett's decision, and then we'll get into Thomas and Alito in their concurrence. So this is from page 24 of the decision, but 30 on the PDF. It is 119 pages long, the entire document. So Barrett writes, finally, the government must show a likelihood that it will suffer irreparable harm absent a stay. When a federal court enters a universal injunction against the government, it, quote, improperly intrudes on a coordinate branch of the government, end quote, and prevents the government from enforcing its policies against non-parties. That is enough to justify interim relief. The principal dissent disagrees, insisting that it strains credulity to treat the executive branch as irreparably harmed by these injunctions, even if they are overly broad. That is so, the principal dissent argues, because the executive order is unconstitutional. Thus, quote, the executive branch has no right to enforce it against anyone. The principled dissent's analysis of the executive order is premature because the birthright citizenship issue is not before us. And because the birthright citizenship issue is not before us, we take no position on whether the dissent's analysis is right. The dissent is wrong to say, however, that a stay applicant cannot demonstrate irreparable harm from a threshold error without also showing that at the end of the day, it will prevail on the underlying merits. And I think that that is particularly important because the birthright citizenship issue hasn't been decided yet. So on the basis of that, the lower courts can't decide the constitutionality of birthright citizenship and then put a nationwide injunction in place. That's putting the cart before the horse. That's what Barrett is pointing out. And I think that that is important. Here's how she concludes. Some say the universal injunction gives the judiciary a powerful tool to check the executive branch. But federal courts do not exercise general oversight of the executive branch. They resolve cases and controversies consistent with the authority Congress has given them. When a court concludes that the executive branch has acted unlawfully, the answer is not for the court to exceed its power too. The government's applications to partially stay the preliminary injunctions are granted, but only to the extent that the injunctions are broader than necessary to provide complete relief to each plaintiff with standing to sue. The lower court shall move expeditiously to ensure that, with respect to each plaintiff, the injunctions comport with this rule and otherwise comply with principles of equity. The injunctions are also stayed to the extent that they prohibit executive agencies from developing and issuing public guidance about the executive plans to implement the executive order, consistent with the Solicitor General's representation. And so that means that the administration can go forward with advice on how the policies should be implemented when they are implemented. I'm going to get to the concurrences in just a second, but this is the other big part that has caught the eye of many in Barrett's decision. And of course, Amy Coney Barrett is much maligned and, maybe it's Mabley, maybe justifiably so, because she's put forward some opinions that people don't like and sided with the liberal justices a number of times. And so people think that Amy Coney Barrett is terrible. They think that Trump got hoodwinked. And, they're taking it out on the Federalist Society, which is fine. Take it out on the Federalist Society. But I think Donald Trump knows what he's doing. Anyhow, this made all of the people who love their cups of liberal tears, this made all of them very happy. This is Zero Hedge. Ketanji nuked from orbit. Well, okay. Here's what Barrett wrote. We will not dwell on Justice Jackson's argument, which is at odds with more than 2 centuries worth of precedent, not to mention the Constitution itself. We observe only this. Justice Jackson decries an imperial executive while embracing an imperial judiciary. And that is judicial supremacy right there. The Supreme Court is the final say on everything. They can trump all branches of government anytime they decide, so long as a case is brought before them, which happens because there is a lawfare apparatus already set up to do exactly that. No one disputes that the executive has a duty to follow the law, Barrett writes, but the judiciary does not have unbridled authority to enforce this obligation. In fact, sometimes the law prohibits the judiciary from doing so. And she cites Marbury versus Madison, concluding that James Madison had violated the law, but holding that the court lacked jurisdiction to issue a writ of mandamus, ordering him to follow it. But if courts do not have the authority to require the executive to adhere to the law universally, compliance with law sometimes becomes a matter of executive prerogative. Observing the limits on judicial authority, including as relevant here, the boundaries of the Judiciary Act of 1789, is required by a judge's oath to follow the law. Justice Jackson skips over that part because analyzing the governing statute involves boring legalese. She seeks to answer a far more basic question of enormous practical significance. May a federal court in the United States of America order the executive to follow the law? In other words, is it unnecessary to consider whether the Congress has constrained the judiciary? What matters is how the judiciary may constrain the executive. Justice Jackson would do well to heed her own admonition. Everyone from the president on down is bound by the law. Barrett writes, that goes for judges too. Great point, Amy Coney Barrett. Let's get back to the decision. So this is Justice Thomas joined by Justice Gorsuch. The court today holds that federal courts may not issue so-called universal injunctions. I agree and join in full. As the court explains, the Judiciary Act of 1789, the statute that, quote, authorizes the federal courts to issue equitable remedies, end quote, does not permit universal injunctions. It authorizes only those remedies traditionally available in equity. And there is no historical tradition allowing courts to provide, quote, relief that extends beyond the parties. That conclusion is dispositive. As I have previously explained, if courts have any authority to issue universal injunctions, it must come from some specific statutory or constitutional grant. But the Judiciary Act is the only real possibility, and serious constitutional questions would arise even if Congress purported to one day allow universal injunctions. I write, so he's saying not only has Congress not allowed these district courts, which Congress set up to issue universal injunctions, even if Congress specifically did allow those district courts to issue universal injunctions, there would still be a constitutional problem with Congress doing that. They would be going outside the bounds of their constitutional authority, creating these other bodies, which are not the Supreme Court, and giving them oversight of the executive branch. Okay? The Congress wouldn't be able to do that. That's what Justice Thomas is getting at here. I write separately to emphasize the majority's guidance regarding how courts should tailor remedies specific to the parties. Courts must not distort, quote, the rule that injunctive relief should be no more burdensome to the defendant than necessary to provide complete relief to the plaintiffs, end quote. Otherwise, they risk replicating the problems of universal injunctions under the guise of granting complete relief. And we'll probably see many examples of that in the future. As the article that we just read noted, some of those challenges are already being brought, and they're being brought in ways to allow new avenues to get around this decision and effectively do the same thing as a universal injunction, thereby tying the executive's hands. As the court recognizes, the complete relief principle operates as a ceiling. In no circumstance can a court award relief beyond that necessary to redress the plaintiff's injuries. Complete relief is not a guarantee. It is the maximum a court can provide. This limitation follows from both Article 3 and traditional equitable practice, because Article 3 limits courts to resolving specific cases and controversies. It requires that any remedy be tailored to redress the plaintiff's particular injury. So they can't just say, this person is injured in this way by the executive's new policy. Therefore, to grant relief to this person or this entity, this group, whatever it is, we have to cancel that policy universally, everywhere it could possibly be applied. That's not allowed to happen, and they have the ability to do that. That's what they were going for. The idea here is that the remedy has to be specific to the case upon which the suit is being brought in the first place. And equitable remedies historically operated on a plaintiff-specific basis. Accordingly, any remedy must, of course, be limited to the inadequacy that produced the injury, in fact, that the plaintiff has established. And I don't want to spend time going through the entire thing. Let's get down to the summary here. For good reason, the court today puts an end to the increasingly common practice of federal courts issuing universal injunctions. The court also makes clear that the complete relief principle provides a ceiling on federal courts' authority, which must be applied alongside other principles of equity and our holding that universal injunctions are impermissible. Lower courts should carefully heed this court's guidance and cabin their grants of injunctive relief in light of historical, equitable limits. If they cannot do so, this court will continue to be duty-bound to intervene. And by duty-bound, he means because of the oath that they take, they actually do have to side with the Constitution. Now, that idea is not prevalent throughout our government. In fact, most of the people don't think that they have to do anything other than follow the quote-unquote Constitution as it exists, which includes the inversion of the Constitution, all the unratified amendments, which I would argue are everything past 10, and certainly everything from the Reconstruction on, statutes, rules, regulations, norms, court precedent. They try to argue that all of that is what the Constitution is, that everything that has happened before is thereby constitutional because it happened and the courts didn't stop it. That's kind of the approach that they take. It's very legalistic. And there is a long history of the legalistic tradition violating all sorts of moral standards and whatnot. So let's get down just for a minute to Alito's concurrence as well. He writes, and this was joined by Thomas, I join the opinion of the court, but write separately to note two related issues that are left unresolved and potentially threaten the practical significance of today's decision: the availability of third-party standing and class certification. The court does not address the weighty issue, whether the state plaintiffs have third-party standing to assert the citizenship clause, getting tongue-tied, and it's only a half an hour in. Assert the citizenship clause claims of their individual residents, okay? So can the state sue on behalf of its residents? Skipping down here, where are we? Ordinarily, a litigant must assert his or her own legal rights and interests and cannot rest a claim to relief on the legal rights or interests of third parties. In limited circumstances, however, the court has permitted a party to assert the rights of a third party. Admittedly, the court has not pinned down the precise circumstances in which the third party standing is permissible, and commentators have emphasized the need for greater doctrinal coherence. But at a minimum, we have said that a litigant seeking to assert the legal rights or interests of others must demonstrate ordinary Article III standing for itself and answer the additional threshold question whether it has standing to raise the rights of others. This latter requirement, as we have explained, entails a showing that the litigant has a close relationship to the right holder and that there is some hindrance to the right holder's ability to protect his own interests. So long as third-party standing doctrine remains good law, federal courts should take care to apply these limitations conscientiously, including against state plaintiffs. That is especially so in cases such as these, in which the parties claiming third-party standing, i.e. the states, are not directly subject to the challenged policy in the relevant respect and face at most collateral injuries. So let's go down to the second one, but remembering the arguments in this case, the states wanted to sue because the potential for birthright citizenship to cause problems in how they provide government services and welfare and the rest of it to people who are here illegally or to the children of illegals that might then still extend to the families, which are the illegals. All of that was what the state believed to be the harm inflicted against the state. Now, that, I think, is absolute garbage. It is certainly a practical concern, but that's because they've put so many bad and unconstitutional policies in place. I get that the birthright citizenship thing is going to cause a lot of problems for a lot of people. That's just undeniable. And anything that a government does and then allows to stand, or any organization does and allows to stand, anything that is compounded like on top of that makes it harder to unwind the situation. But it doesn't mean that the situation doesn't need to be unwound. It does need to be unwound. Same sort of principle we talked about with the 14th Amendment. And so it's a matter of how you go about doing that. And the courts, the states, and the courts have agreed with the states. They're arguing that their policies, the way they run their government, the way they deal with these illegal aliens, their welfare programs and government services, all of that is going to be so disrupted that somehow it's the court's responsibility to side with them against the Constitution. And that's crazy. And so they're going to have a number of problems with this, but addressing the third party issue is interesting. Back to Alito. Second, today's decision will have very little value if district courts award relief to broadly defined classes without following Rule 23's procedural protections for class certification. The class action is a powerful tool, and we have accordingly held that class certification is proper only if the trial court is satisfied after a rigorous analysis that the prerequisites of Rule 23 have been satisfied. And this was an extended part of the arguments in the court a month or so ago. Alito also wrote, putting the kibosh on universal injunctions does nothing to disrupt Rule 23's requirements. And so these are the requirements that define a class that would then have standing to bring a lawsuit. So nothing about the universal injunctions affects the standing for those classes. The class standing issues still have to be followed. They can't just determine that we can't do universal injunctions. So what we're going to do is bring a class action lawsuit, and that class action lawsuit is going to include the class of everyone. Okay. So that's what the clarification there is for. Okay. Let's go to Jonathan Turley on Fox News. Donald Trump actually posted this on Truth Social. This is before the president came out to make his statement on the court's decision.
Keep in mind, when we watch President Trump at the upcoming event, what was at stake was still his legacy. He went forward in a number of different ways to achieve the same results. But what presidents have said is that when these individual judges do this, it takes us a couple years often to run the course and reverse these things. Then we're in the second half of our term. We don't have time to fulfill our promises to voters. This doesn't make any sense. It's not workable. And here the Supreme Court is agreeing with the Trump administration that these judges are well past their authority given to them, and they need to cut back on these injunctions and focus on the parties in their immediate case, in their immediate district.
All right. So again, he mentions voters there, and that really is the issue. Now, elections are fake, so voters is a meaningless term. But if elections were not fake and we were actually electing a president, even through proper methods, which we don't have now, it would still matter that the courts, especially these district courts set up by Congress and the judiciary, do not have the ability to override the will and mandate of the American people and their vehicle, which is the president. It's supposed to be Congress too. But, Congress is illegitimate and the product of fake elections. There's no clear mandate whatsoever for the Congress to govern. There's no clear mandate for anyone in the Congress to govern. So, I mean, unless there's some superstar somewhere in a district that is so red or so blue that you can actually detect a real support for that person rather than a support for the letter D or the letter R that just happens to be carried by that person. And I can't think of any of those. Maybe someone like AOC or MTG who's on TV all the time and whose constituents presumably support that person because it's overwhelmingly red in MTG's case or overwhelmingly blue in AOC's case. Either way, that would be an exception to the general rule. And, when primary elections are also fake, it's really hard to detect any legitimacy for any of these people. The choice of the constituents might have been wiped away in the primary process, and sure, the constituents might lean more Republican or more Democrat and therefore put a Republican or Democrat in office, but that is not indicative of a mandate. Donald Trump has an actual visible mandate. He goes out to events, goes out to rallies, he does speeches. It is clear that the people are on his side at all times at this point, and that mandate is growing every day. So let us continue here. This is Donald Trump responding on Truth Social to the decision. He said, giant win in the United States Supreme Court. Even the birthright citizenship hoax has been indirectly hit hard. It had to do with the babies of slaves, same year, not the scamming of our immigration process. Congratulations to Attorney General Pam Bondi, Solicitor General John Sauer, and the entire DOJ. News conference at the White House, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. So let's go to Donald Trump's statement from that press conference on this issue right here. And there we are.
Decision. An amazing decision, one that we're very happy about. This morning, the Supreme Court has delivered a monumental victory for the Constitution, the separation of powers, and the rule of law in striking down the excessive use of nationwide injunctions to interfere with the normal functioning of the executive branch. The Supreme Court has stopped the presidency itself. That's what they've done. And really, it's been an amazing period of time this last hour. There are people elated all over the country. I've seen such happiness and spirit. Sometimes you don't see that, but this case is very important. I was elected on a historic mandate, but in recent months we've seen a handful of radical left judges effectively try to overrule the rightful powers of the president to stop the American people from getting the policies that they voted for in record numbers. It was a grave threat to democracy, frankly, and instead of merely ruling on the immediate cases before them, these judges have attempted to dictate the law for the entire nation. In practice, this meant that if any one of the nearly 700 federal judges disagreed with the policy of a duly elected president of the United States, he or she could block that policy from going into effect or at least delay it for many years, tie it up in the court system. This was a colossal abuse of power which never occurred in American history prior to recent decades, and we've been hit with more nationwide injunctions than were issued in the entire 20th century together. Think of it, more than the entire 20th century. Me. I'm grateful to the Supreme Court for stepping in and solving this very, very big and complex problem, and they've made it very simple. I want to thank Justice Barrett, who wrote the opinion brilliantly, as well as Chief Justice Roberts, and Justices Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Thomas. Great people. Thanks for this decision, and thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with numerous policies that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis. And some of the cases we're talking about would be ending birthright citizenship, which now comes to the fore. That was meant for the babies of slaves. It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation. This was, in fact, it was the same date, the exact same date, the end of the Civil War. It was meant for the babies of slaves, and it's so clean and so obvious. But this lets us go there and finally win that case, because hundreds of thousands of people are pouring into our country under birthright citizenship, and it wasn't meant for that reason. It was meant for the babies of slaves. So thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with these numerous policies and those that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis, including birthright citizenship, ending sanctuary city funding, suspending refugee resettlement, freezing unnecessary funding, stopping federal taxpayers from paying for transgender surgeries, and numerous other priorities of the American people. We have so many of them. I have a whole list. I'm not going to bore you, and I'm going to have Pam get up and say a few words, but there's really, she could talk as long as she wants because this is a very important decision. This is a decision that covers a tremendous amount of territory. But I want to just thank again the Supreme Court for this ruling. It's a giant. It's a giant. And they should be very proud, and our country should be very proud of the Supreme Court today. And with that, I'd like you to listen.
So those were a lot of issues that President Trump just mentioned toward the end there. And he's had all of these executive orders and executive actions. Many of them have seen these nationwide injunctions. I think it's over 100 now, something like that. And all that's going to go away. We're going to hear the details on that, I guess, next Thursday, in how the Supreme Court recommends that be handled or something to that effect. So that'll be interesting to wait and see. But the birthright citizenship thing, I don't know how this is going to work. And this is just speculation. But when something is ruled unconstitutional, it doesn't just become unconstitutional, okay? The things that have happened that depend on that unconstitutional act, those things are stricken as well. And so depending on how they go with this birthright citizenship thing, you got to wonder about the citizenship status of some pretty prominent figures like Kamala Harris or Barack Obama. And, you know, they're going to undo the whole fake Biden illegitimate presidency with the auto pen issue. What happens when Obama's birth certificate comes back? What happens when birthright citizenship comes back? I mean, I guess his mother is an American citizen or something, but I don't know, man. There's going to be issues that are coming up. And didn't Ted Cruz maybe have some issue with that with his father Rafael, who was a political activist in Cuba, and then tied to what was his? Why can't I think of his name? Gosh, man, we were just talking about this like 2 weeks ago. How did I get so dumb? It's been a long week. Oh gosh, Lee Harvey Oswald. Duh. I have to like think my way through the whole JFK thing and Jack Ruby. Hey, who did Jack Ruby shoot? I try to remember things in such strange ways. Like every way that I could remember them, all the different scenarios that have attached to that thing in my head, I start playing those out. Then I'm like, oh yeah, there it is. And I don't know why it took me that long on that one. Okay, let's keep going. This is one more from Trump in that press event discussing this decision.
You say to Americans who fear that this is more and more concentration of power in the White House and the executive.
Well, this really brings back the Constitution. This is what it's all about. And this is really the opposite of that. I mean, the question is fine, but it's the opposite. The Constitution has been brought back.
And he's exactly right about that. And what he means is that this is not a usurpation of power. This is not a gathering of power into the executive branch. This is the performance of the executive branch power the way the Constitution intended. And the elimination of universal nationwide injunctions is obviously protecting the executive branch's authority to make orders exactly like this one and to tell the executive branch agencies how to act and interpret law. Okay. There were other decisions, not only today, but a big one yesterday as well. So let's quickly get into a couple of them before we move on to other subjects. And there are some other subjects. NBC News: Supreme Court backs parents seeking to opt their kids out of LGBTQ books in elementary school. The Supreme Court on Friday bolstered religious rights as it ruled in favor of parents who objected to LGBTQ-themed books that a Maryland county approved for use in elementary school classrooms. In a 6-3 vote, the court backed the parents' claims that the Montgomery County Board of Education's decision not to allow an opt-out for their children violated their religious rights under the Constitution's First Amendment, which protects religious expression. The board's introduction of the LGBTQ plus inclusive storybooks, along with its decision to withhold opt-outs, places an unconstitutional burden on the parents' rights to the free exercise of their religion. And I absolutely agree with that, as I imagine many of you do as well. Justice Sotomayor wrote the dissent, and in that dissent, she wrote, "The result will be chaos for this nation's public schools. Given the great diversity of religious beliefs in this country, countless interactions that occur every day in public schools might expose children to messages that conflict with a parent's beliefs." Well, I guess that could cause chaos, but potentially that's a good and necessary chaos, because a lot of what the schools teach shouldn't be taught. If the schools are teaching things that directly conflict with religious interpretations, then maybe those subjects just shouldn't be taught in school. It was supposed to be reading, writing, and arithmetic so that children can know how to process their world. They learn the important things, okay? If you want to expand to other subjects, I guess that could be okay. I'm not sure that that's necessary. I'm basically just anti-school at this point. Like, I'm anti-elementary school, I'm anti-high school, I'm anti-college. All of it, just no school. All right. Set up individual learning centers and apprenticeships or whatever else to learn how to do certain activities or study certain subjects. People can obviously read books on their own as much as they want. Now that we have the internet, people can just watch classes on YouTube. Like, the idea that we need to send kids to a state-run indoctrination center for the first, aside from their initial 4 or 5 years, then the next 13 years of their lives are spent in state indoctrination centers or private schools that are still subject to state funding and state regulations, serving essentially the same purpose. And then they get shipped off to a college doing the same thing, collecting federal money to provide a state indoctrination. And this somehow is supposed to train us to function competently in a society that is not based entirely within the false reality that they've created. I don't know, man. I'm anti-school. So they're worried about what the schools are going to be able to teach. Well, they're going to have to strip away a lot of that curriculum. And that's a good thing. And I'm hopeful that they do that. Take the summer and go do it, guys, because otherwise the parents should just begin opting their kids out of all sorts of stuff. Opt them out of false histories. Opt them out of race-based learning. Opt them out of their sex classes. All that stuff. Just do away with it. I would not want my child learning about any of those subjects from a state indoctrination center, because I did that. And I know that that wasn't the right thing. Okay. There's other ways I could have learned the important information. And along with the important information, I got a whole bunch of information that not only wasn't important, but wasn't true. And I don't think that any kid should be forced to endure that. And I don't think it's productive for our society to do that. And I definitely don't think that people who own property should have that property confiscated to pay for other kids to do that. So that's just me. Oh, man. What a messed up society we have that any of this could have ever been allowed in the first place. And it's funny because they always institute these things. They always put them in place and then sing their praises after these major extermination wars, like World War II, for instance. You take the nation's brave and courageous young men, send them to a foreign shore to die, and then continue society in the regime agenda without anyone to fight back against it. And all of a sudden, hey, everybody has to go to college. And then you do Vietnam and you're like, guys, brave, courageous, Men, we're going to draft you and send you away to go die on foreign lands. And in the meantime, you can stay if you have college. And over the generations, that really does whittle away the brave and courageous class, replacing it with a class of people who don't want to go fight for the country, but are totally committed to their indoctrination, AKA education. And again, I say this as someone who went all the way through the formal education. I didn't go get an advanced degree. I didn't go get a doctorate or a master's, but I did almost go to law school, and eventually chose not to because I didn't want to spend the rest of my life doing that. And I had college loans from undergrad, and I actually received a full scholarship to go to law school at a pretty good school, and decided not to because even with a full scholarship, you ended up having to take out 15 or 20 grand a year just to pay for room and board and expenses. And so then you come out of law school and you're $80,000, $100,000 or more in debt. And it's like, at that point, you just have to go work 60 or 70 or 80 hours for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. And maybe at some point you meet someone and maybe you have a couple kids you never see. And then that just sounded like a recipe for a midlife crisis and a terrible life. So I was like, I'm going to get out of this. I think I made the right decision ultimately. There have been some ups and downs, I would probably have a more materially successful life had I gone that route and a great deal more stability, but I would have prevented myself from experiences I could have never had otherwise. And I would not be doing this right now. So it all works out the way it works out. All right. Let's go. Wait, where are we here? Here we are.
I just want to get your sense on this because in this particular case in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is right outside of where we are right now, Washington, D.C., these public schools, the elementary kids, if the teacher wanted to read something, have them read something about LGBTQ plus individuals, their parents, in this particular case, whether Muslims, Christians, or Jews, if they were very religious and were opposed to LGBTQ, they could say that their kids did not have to listen to the teachers.
So what this decision says is that parents have a right under the Constitution, if they have a religious objection to these particular texts, right, not to pull them out of the class entirely, but the students don't have to read these books or the like. It'll be up to, I suppose, the school districts in the first instance to figure out how to implement this. This is not a surprise, this decision out of a conservative court that has been moving to expand free exercise rights substantially in recent years. I think the real question is, how broadly is it written? How broadly does this precedent now sweep going forward? It's not so much just about the opt-out rights from this particular book or that particular book, but does this include, for example, instruction on evolution in scientific classrooms, in high schools, in public schools? And that we'll have to read the opinion to find out to some extent. But that's the real sort of underlying stakes here.
Yeah, I think it should include that. And they also shouldn't teach about space or dinosaurs or false histories. And it should go on and on. And at some point, the religious opt-out is fine, but it should really be that the parents can opt their kids out of whatever schooling and whatever learning they don't want their kids to go through. I think it should be that simple. And if that causes chaos in the schools, well, then what the schools need to do is pare down to the bare minimum essential information and teach that. But they don't want to do that because then the state indoctrination is not effective to create perfect servants for the state, okay? The job of state indoctrination centers is to create groveling statists who will serve the agenda of the state. There's no other purpose for it. We think that there's something noble about all of this. There's nothing noble about it. They're not doing us a favor. They are creating groveling statists that will serve to implement their agenda, okay? That's the intent. And if there are kids that go through the education and do other things, that's fine. But the intent is that everyone will be indoctrinated fully into the culture, into the common history, into that understanding of how things should go, and eventually produce the employee class that will push the agenda forward. And I think that our country has probably had enough of that. And hopefully the people will be in agreement with that notion as well within the next 5 or 10 years, because, you know, we are clearly ahead of where a lot of people or the general public are when it comes to many of these political issues. And we have been consistently years ahead over the course of these last 5 years. But no matter how far ahead we are, we know that eventually people will catch up, because what's happening is directional and it's not going to be turned around. Okay. So we can, and I talk about informational time travel and the rest of it. The point of that all is, if we understand the directionality is headed in one way, and that more people are walking in that direction each day, and that there's not going to be some turnaround point in the foreseeable future, if at all, then we should be looking toward how to maximize that direction in every aspect. Okay. If we know we're going that way, let's figure out all the things that are down there. Okay. And if all those things that are down there are good, we should assume that eventually all of them will be adopted and implemented, so long as we keep going in that direction. And so then we can take a maximal approach to all of those outcomes. All right. And we should live in that world, even though those maximal outcomes have not yet been achieved. We should act and operate as though they will be achieved and guide our actions in that direction. If everybody did that, we would actually achieve all of the maximal outcomes. And I think that that should be a goal. And I'm obviously writing this book right now, but the title is American Maximalism. It is going to be about that exact principle. We should understand our ideology and our mythology as Americans. We should understand that we are headed in that direction. We should understand what the potential outcomes are, the range of outcomes, and we should go as fast as possible in all of those directions. We should live the way we expect to live in the future. If we live that way now, then the future will bear that out. I hope that makes sense. Starborn in the chat, we are very glad you are here, Chris. It worked out. Thanks for everything you do. Thank you for that Rumble rant and other positive words. Bay Theater Dave says, without Chris, we'd only have Burning Bright. Yes, that's true. That would be something. Okay, let's keep going. Darn it. That's not the link I wanted. Okay, I had an FCC link pulled up here, and instead I only had the actual decision itself. We're not going to go through that. Let's just go to Politico's coverage here. I have not had time to read those decisions. I barely had time to read those portions of the nationwide injunction decision. So, okay, Supreme Court upholds FCC broadband fund. The Supreme Court on Friday upheld the constitutionality of a multi-billion-dollar fund used to expand telephone and broadband services. The 6-3 ruling is a victory for the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, which operates the pot of money in question known as the Universal Service Fund. It's also a rare win at the Supreme Court for agency power, as the court's conservative majority, which is often skeptical of independent agencies, passed up an opportunity to further weaken the administrative state. 3 liberal justices and 3 conservatives formed the court's majority. 3 other conservatives dissented. The money in the Universal Service Fund comes from charges collected from telephone providers through a surcharge on customers' bills. It is used for a mix of internet connectivity subsidy programs that help schools, libraries, low-income households, and internet providers in rural areas. In upholding the fund, the justices rejected a bid by some legal conservatives to weaken the administrative state by reviving a controversial theory known as the non-delegation doctrine. under that doctrine, Congress has extremely limited authority to delegate policymaking decisions to executive branch agencies. Elena Kagan wrote the majority opinion, and in that she said, for nearly 3 decades, the work of Congress and the Commission in establishing universal service programs has led to a more fully connected country, and it has done so while leaving fully intact the separation of powers integral to our Constitution. Well, again, if you are starting out with the practical benefits of a policy as the basis for deciding a Supreme Court case, you have got it all wrong, and we shouldn't expect anything more from Elena Kagan, nor Sotomayor, nor Jackson, who's not even a real justice, totally illegitimate. It is ridiculous to think that Ketanji Brown Jackson will be a career Supreme Court justice. The dissent, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch. Writing for the dissenters, Gorsuch said, the court effectively rewrote the law in order to deem it unconstitutional. We wind up in much the same place, only now with judges rather than presidents or bureaucrats making our laws. So, not so great. But I was actually surprised. I don't know if some of you may have been watching Badlands Daily today. Brian and I talked about these decisions. They were kind of coming out as we were doing the show, so we would cut to the decision and discuss a little bit. I definitely thought that this was going to go the other way. The court has made so many decisions that strip away agency power, as that Politico article noted. It was really surprising to see them keep this one, particularly when it comes to a tax. And maybe, I don't know what kind of pressures were involved in this case. And again, I haven't read the decision, so there might be something that changes my mind on this that I'm unaware of. But, the taxes in general are up for debate. Okay. At this point, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. Trump is chipping away at the ability to tax at all, to have a federal income tax at all. The federal income tax is unconstitutional. It should not exist. Okay. The 16th Amendment is ridiculous. And all of that should be voided, as we've now discussed multiple times in this show. The fact that this is a tax levied by an agency, if they are going to take away an agency's ability to implement a tax, that gets real tough when you start looking at the IRS. And so I have to wonder if this is not attached to that bigger issue. And if so, one would then suspect that there are a great many pressures on these justices to have decided a certain way. And who knows, we're just going to have to let this play out into the future. This is a bit of a disappointing one as far as I'm concerned. Kara Maga, $20, Rumble rant in the chat. Jackson is dumber than a box of Crockett's. Huh. Guess you got a very good point there. She also says, APL, you've got a very good point there as well. And as a bonus, I'm going to give you a Gutfeld AP.
Anna Paulina Luna. All right.
Not quite as good. Also, by the way, Burning Bright and I covered Crimson Tide on Badlands Story Hour on Tuesday evening. And there was one more tiny clip from that movie that I did not share because it was inappropriate for the show. Not like in a bad way. But we have a new soundboard edition, and here it is.
Very fine people, sir.
Very fine people, sir. Because, of course, there were very fine people on both sides, if you remember. So we have this guy screaming.
Very fine people, sir.
Love it. Okay. One more decision, and then we will move on from SCOTUS, the end of the SCOTUS term. And gotta say, speculated a couple of weeks ago that there could be more chaos surrounding these Supreme Court decisions. You really have to wonder if it's not happening. Geez, I can't talk at all now. If it's not happening because the National Guard was sent out, or if they just don't actually have the motivation and the fire behind them to put together a real protest effort over any of this. The No Kings protests were a failure. They had to kind of piggyback on, and that's piggyback. They had to piggyback on the gay pride parade to be able to make it look like people actually showed up to the No Kings protests and rallies, even after getting virtually every one of the country's communist organizations to participate in outreach for that event. This is the Associated Press. States can block Medicaid money for health care at Planned Parenthood, the Supreme Court says. States can block the country's biggest abortion provider, Planned Parenthood, from receiving Medicaid money for health services such as contraception and cancer screenings, the Supreme Court ruled on Thursday. The 6-3 opinion by Justice Neil Gorsuch, joined by the rest of the court's conservatives, was not directly about abortion, but it comes as Republicans back a wider push across the country to defund the organization. It closes off Planned Parenthood's primary court path to keeping Medicaid funding in place, patient lawsuits. The justices found that while Medicaid law allows people to choose their own provider, that does not make it a right enforceable in court. The court split along ideological lines, with the 3 liberals dissenting in the case from the case from South Carolina. Public health care money generally cannot be used to pay for abortions. No, it expressly and specifically cannot be used to pay for abortions. But Medicaid patients go to Planned Parenthood for other needs, in part because it can be difficult to find a doctor who takes the publicly funded insurance, the organization has said. Well, yes, they will make that case, but that case is kind of a dishonest one. They've also made the sidebar case that the money that goes to Planned Parenthood is used to pay for these other services and not for abortions. If that's so, why is this upsetting for abortion rights advocates? Are they worried that Planned Parenthood won't survive without their main business, their cancer screenings, and what was the other one? Women's health care or something? Sorry. I thought it mentioned the other for other needs. Never mind. Now I'm totally messing everything. Oh, here we go. Contraception and cancer screenings. So we're talking about Medicaid patients going to Planned Parenthood. Money can be used for contraception, which is condoms, birth control, that they hand out for free, and for cancer screenings. Are we to believe that Planned Parenthood's primary business is giving away condoms and doing cancer screenings? Well, there's no way anyone could possibly believe that. It's obviously abortion, and it's obviously because they are providing aborted fetal tissue as an input product for other industries. So that's where the money comes from. So the Medicaid is being cut off, and what's going to happen to Planned Parenthood? It really does get to be a gruesome subject, and you can see the dishonesty there. They've been screaming for years that the money is not, in fact, fungible, when obviously it is, and saying that federal money can still go to Planned Parenthood because that federal money is not being used for abortions. It's other money that's used for abortions. This federal money just pays for contraception and cancer screenings and women's health care and the like. Starborn, $5 in the chat. Hopefully APL will read your book soon. APL forgot in my other rant. Well, good point. Hopefully the book's done soon. And I can only give you one APL for that, though, because we just did 2 APLs, and we don't need to do all APLs all day. But it is great. So it's always a pleasure to do it. Okay. Oh, whoa. Polymathanon, $10 in the Rumble rant chat, or in the Rumble chat with a rant. You know what I mean. American Maximalism. I love it. Can't wait to buy 2 copies, one for me and one for APL. Well, you got me there, buddy. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on from the court decision segment of our broadcast and go to this. This is what every based and red-pilled mainstream normie influencer spent all day on yesterday. They wanted to make sure that everyone knew they were anti-communist, even though they are supporters of the global regime and the central narrative, which is even more important than supporting the global regime. They're doing that part by accident, but they are addicted to the central narrative because they cannot find their way out of it. And that is the really destructive part. Donald J. Trump on Truth Social yesterday, this was Wednesday afternoon. It's finally happened. The Democrats have crossed the line. Zoran Mamdani, a 100% communist lunatic, has just won the Dem primary and is on his way to becoming mayor. This is of New York. We've had radical lefties before, but this is getting a little ridiculous. He looks terrible. His voice is grating. He's not very smart. He's got AOC +3, dummies all, backing him. And even our great Palestinian senator, Crying Chuck Schumer, is groveling over him. Yes, this is a big moment in the history of our country. And credit to Donald Trump for saying groveling. Wonderful, wonderful concept. Groveling is, and it should be talked about much more often. Here is Mamdani with his grating voice. Let's see exactly who this commie is.
The Jewish New Yorkers, like Jewish Americans, are fearful in this moment of anti-Semitism. They're fearful, especially after the horrific attacks that we saw in Washington, D.C. and in Boulder, Colorado. And they're fearful also in conversations that I have heard myself about life in this city. I spoke to a Jewish man in Williamsburg not too many weeks ago who told me about the fact that he now locks the door that he used to close, that he used to keep open for years because of a fear of who may come in. I spoke to a friend of mine after October 7th who told me about going to his synagogue for Shabbat services and hearing the door open behind him and turning around with a tremor going up his back, not knowing who was walking in and what they wished for them. And ultimately, it's through the conversations I've had with Jewish New Yorkers that I have developed a proposal for the Department of Community Safety that would include an 800% increase in funding for hate crime prevention programs. Because ultimately, we cannot simply say that anti-Semitism has no home in this city or no place in this country. We have to do more than talk about it. We have to tackle it. And that's what we will do through this funding and through this commitment. We will root out bigotry across the 5 boroughs.
Powerful stuff, particularly because it seems like now, again, elections are fake, okay? This election, of course, was fake as well. But in the statistics that are recorded and reported, which form the narrative to explain these things, he crushed it in the Jewish vote, apparently in Brooklyn. I don't know how. We're told that's not what was supposed to happen. But that's what did happen, we are told. So everybody's freaking out about this guy. And fine, this would probably be a terrible mayor. But elections are fake. And so you have to think about why these people are put into these positions. It doesn't matter that this guy might be mayor of New York, same way that it doesn't really matter that Katie Hobbs is the governor of Arizona, or that John Fetterman's a senator, or that Kathy Hochul's the governor of New York. It's all nonsense, okay? And this guy might be the mayor of New York, but what's really important is who chose to put him there and why they chose to put him there. Let's continue. Bill Ackman is not happy about this at all. This is Black Man. That's how I think of his name. Like just kind of, you go a little low on the I, and then it's just Black Man. Strange name. He said, I have a great idea on NYC. I will share it as soon as I can. I was a bit depressed when I woke up this morning, but I am now optimistic. Oh, thank goodness Bill Ackman is able to cope. This is the degenerate from Midas Touch and the Circus on Showtime, Ron Filipkowski, one of the most enraged Trump haters online, to the point where it seems like this guy must be some kind of pro-Trump info op that is just publicly anti-Trump because he's so bad at what he does and so Trump deranged. But he says, Bill Ackman says he and the oligarchs are willing to spend a fortune to back an independent candidate to jump into the NYC mayor's race to defeat Mamdani. And here is Ackman's message cited by Filipkowski. He writes, importantly, there are hundreds of millions of dollars of capital available to back a competitor to Mamdani that can be put together overnight. Believe me, I'm in the text strings and WhatsApp groups so that a great alternative candidate won't spend any time raising funds. So if the right candidate would raise his or her hands tomorrow, the funds will pour in. I'm sure that Mike Bloomberg will share his How to Win the Mayoralty IP and deliver his entire election apparatus and system to the aspiring candidate so that the candidate can focus all of his or her energy on the campaign. Now, Filipkowski's analysis is irrelevant to me. I don't care whether he likes black man or not. The oligarch factor, though, is certainly relevant here. But even more than that is the fact that our elections are fake. Okay. What Bill Ackman just described is the funding and control end of our fake elections. The system that actually runs our elections is itself totally fake, fraudulent, incapable of producing legitimate results, incapable of conveying legitimacy to someone with designs on governing anyone. Okay. It's not capable of doing that. But in addition to that, we have this problem. Again, he says Mike Bloomberg, who was, the Bloomberg billionaire, he jumped into the election in 2016, spent a ton of his own money, got absolutely nothing done. He had an organization that he was funding some effort with LeBron James to make sure that felons in Florida could vote. Mike Bloomberg was a mayor of New York City. Some people think a successful mayor, but he is just about as globalist and centrist and elitist as you could possibly find. So he's going to join in this effort to defeat Mamdani. He's going to put his entire election apparatus and system behind the aspiring candidate. Well, what is that entire election apparatus and system? That was from a while back, right? A decade or more ago. He still has that? What is that apparatus and that system? And they have hundreds of millions of dollars to put in. The candidate doesn't have to worry about any of that. Just focus on the campaign. Just focus on people liking you and taking you more seriously than this other guy. And we'll figure out a way to win this fake election by using all our money and power to do that. It's pretty incredible when you see it just laid out like that. Hey, we're the billionaires. Don't worry. We're going to buy this election. People might be worried about the communists. I would be just as worried about those communists. Okay? Those are all global regime actors, oligarchs. They're the elites. Okay? If the movement is anti-elitist, and I'm not suggesting, by the way, that anyone go out and vote for Mamdani in a fake election. I'm just pointing out the fact that this is what the competition looks like. This is using the street cred these people gained by being Trump aligned throughout, the second half of 2024, leading into the fake election against Kamala Harris. All these people credited themselves for winning that election. And of course, he's got this secret text chain and WhatsApp group where they're planning who the next mayor of New York is going to be and probably recruiting candidates and saying that they'll fund those candidates. Is that the sort of thing that should be allowed? Well, I guess you can't stop powerful interests from recruiting political candidates, but it's not ideal. It's good that at least we can observe this thing. But Yeah, it seems like there is something else going on with this Mamdani thing. The level of public attention is probably higher than it would deserve. So, got to wonder what's going on there. Someone just sent me a link. Oh, this is funny. Oh, this is really funny. Okay, so this is from some techno 2211. I think that's how that screen name would be said. It's like reading license plates. It's nice to figure out what they say. So this is from X, formerly Twitter, and I guess this is this Mamdani character. Let's go ahead and play this and see how this goes. Also, worth noting that apparently his father was a close associate of Barack Obama's father, and his mother is an actress in Hollywood.
Chop it up, chop it up, chop it up. So I leave my work like Shakira. I so why call me a mulera. I got the same mysterious chopper.
All right, so it's giving some of the biographical information on this guy, and this apparently is Mamdani in a rap video, his own rap video. It says, before joining politics, Mr. Mamdani made rap music under the alias Mr. Cardamom in Uganda, where he was born. Then it says, he is the son of award-winning filmmaker Mira Nair and Columbia University professor Mahmoud Mamdani, and that would be the Obama associate. During his campaign, Mamdani used humor and his art's roots on platforms like TikTok. Oh, it appeals to the youth. He's just like them. And there's him in a dress, I guess. Or is that just an apron? There's some food or something there. Looks like he's wearing a dress, to be honest. His creative outreach helped connect with younger and immigrant voters, and the campaign echoed his music, bold, grassroots, and anti-establishment. And New York actually was trying to get New York City for their municipal elections, which I think this is one. They were trying to make it possible for illegal aliens to be legally able to vote in those elections. And apparently New York is some overwhelming percentage, like 40% foreign born, not even just descendants of immigrants, but foreign born, 40% foreign born in New York City right now. And you look at the global city agenda from the global regime, New York is now a global city. Okay. It's got everything that the elite could want. It has some culture, I guess, remaining, though most of it's being moved out and replaced with wannabe elites who are trying to get into that top level and still think that there's some cachet to living in big urban environments. I think that is all gone. But besides that, it's basically just these global cities are finance hubs and industry and commercial hubs, all set up for the upper crust of the elites, and then with a servant class beneath that, which is why they need all the public housing. And they'll bring the illegals in, tell you it's all homeless people. We need homeless housing. And they just build public housing for the servant class. And, you know, you can see that going around some of the major new, very expensive, very modern cities in the Middle East as well. Real Purdy, $20 in the chat. Greetings, moderator. Still out there cutting through the noise, I see. Saving the Republic, one mic drop at a time. Well, I hope that's what's happening. I hope I'm not just doing these mic drops into the void. But you never know. All right. Moving on from that, Kami. It'll be interesting to see where that goes. I don't think of this Mamdani character as anything more than a character. This guy is a character, okay? It's a fake election. Primaries are even faker than normal elections. He beat Andrew Cuomo, so there's got to be something else going on. The Cuomo political machine has existed in New York State for 4 or 5 or 6 decades. I mean, I remember being a kid in New York and Mario Cuomo was the governor. So it's been a long time. All right. Okay, so this is Trump's follow-up to his last post on Mamdani. We're going to shift from Mamdani into elections, generally speaking. Trump wrote, I have an idea for the Democrats to bring them back into play. After years of being left out in the cold, including suffering one of the greatest losses in history, the 2024 presidential election, the Democrats should nominate low IQ candidate Jasmine Crockett for president, and AOC plus 3 should be, respectively, vice president and 3 high-level members of the cabinet. Added together with our future communist mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, our country is really screwed. Yeah, Crockett is a character as well. People get very, very mad about Jasmine Crockett, and she is ridiculous and offensive and all that. I get it. But she's also just a character. Okay, so now let's get into elections more broadly. This is Newsweek from a couple of weeks ago. 2024 election results under scrutiny as lawsuit advances. A legal case questioning the accuracy of the 2024 election is moving forward. Smart Legislation, the action arm of Smart Elections, a quote-unquote nonpartisan watchdog group, filed a lawsuit over voting discrepancies in Rockland County, New York. Judge Rachel Tanguay of the New York Supreme Court ruled in open court Monday that the allegations were serious enough for discovery to proceed. The lawsuit could renew debate about the 2024 election, though it won't change the outcome since Congress has certified the results, declaring President Trump the winner. And isn't that interesting? You can't change the outcome because Congress has already certified it. That's what we heard in the fake and illegitimate Biden term. It comes amid unconfirmed reports that voting machines were secretly altered before ballots were cast in November's election. The federally accredited testing lab, ProVNV, that signed off on significant changes to ES&S voting machines, which are used in over 40% of U.S. counties, vanished from public view after the election. Wow. According to the Dissent in Bloom Substack, Jack Cobb, the director of ProVNV, told Newsweek via email that the changes approved by the lab relate to ballot boxes, ballot bins, changing printers to newer models, adding mounting brackets, and moving the location of files. There is really no change of any significance, he said. I would argue that every change is a change of significance because every change is either a move toward election integrity or away from election integrity, and all the moves they make are away from election integrity. The entire purpose of this system is to create loopholes so that they can substantiate whatever fake result is agreed to in advance of actually holding an election. Elections are nothing more than psyops we participate in, by which the regime proves to us all of these things that are happening that you don't like, you chose them or your neighbor chose them. So be mad at yourself or be mad at your neighbors. And mostly be mad at your neighbors because you did the right thing. Just the neighbors on your side, they're not as committed enough to vote, so you lost. And the neighbors on the other side, well, they want the exact opposite thing, so they're your enemies, and you should fight them. From the regime perspective, that makes a lot of sense. And then, they include some statements from people involved and people observing. But I love, let's go through a couple of these. Max Bonamente said in a paper on the voting data from Rockland County, these data would require extreme sociological or political causes for their explanation and would benefit from further assurances as to their fidelity. Strange that none of our claims in 2020 received that kind of review from people who are supporters of the regime. They didn't believe it back then. They do believe it now. And of course, prior to 2016, they believed it as well. Kostis Panagopoulos, a professor of political science at Northeastern University, said statistical irregularities in elections should always be investigated. but the sources of such inconsistencies, which can include error or miscalculation, are not always nefarious. Still, scrutinizing election results can strengthen confidence in elections. Mistakes can happen. In this case, the drop-off inconsistencies could reflect the idiosyncratic nature of the 2024 presidential election cycle. Alone, statistical comparisons to previous cycles cannot provide definitive proof of wrongdoing, and that is especially true when you understand that previous cycles were also fake results. In any case, it does not appear that any of those inconsistencies would be sufficient to change the outcomes of any of the elections in question in New York State. That does not mean they should not be scrutinized, and any errors, if verified, should be corrected for the historical record. But there is not necessarily any need to invalidate any of these elections in these jurisdictions. And I don't know where these people get off making statements like that. There is no need to invalidate any of these elections, regardless of whether or not they were properly held in the first place. That's crazy. If they can't prove that all of their elections were held in accordance with the law and that the results were verified and verifiable and transparent to the public in every case, the election is invalid, okay? We should hold high standards on these things, right? Same principle as the schooling earlier and how many subjects they would have to remove from the curriculum based on the parents' ability to opt students out and for parents' ability to do that en masse. Well, if you got to remove all those subjects, so be it. That's fine. That is totally acceptable, okay? Whether that causes chaos for a few months while you compose a different curriculum that actually meets the standards, that's irrelevant. That's an adjustment that has to happen. So either it can happen gradually or all at once, okay? In terms of these elections, invalidate all of them. You have to meet the high standard. The high standard is that these results are verifiable, that the laws are adhered to, and that everyone can check on them. Okay? There shouldn't be any doubt whatsoever when it comes to conveying legitimacy to govern. The people's will and consent to be governed cannot be achieved through a process that doesn't meet those standards. And that's all there is to it. Okay? So invalidate all the elections. If you have this problem, and that problem is present in other places, which of course it is, but if you have it anywhere, then any election that problem touches, invalid. So it doesn't matter if you say there weren't enough votes affected here to overturn the election. You can't possibly know that. So therefore, because your results are fake, and you may overlook batches of votes that have the same problem that you just missed, okay? Once there is a problem in the system, it has to be voided and the election should be held again, all right? We need to work forward to that, again, maximal outcomes. And I would also add, I'm not entirely certain that legitimate elections are possible, nor that having elections is the optimal expression of the people's will and consent to be governed. And those issues will eventually be addressed in the future. It's too bad that we cannot get to them now. Okay. While we're on the subject of elections, this is from the Twitter normie, Ryan James Gerdusky, who occasionally goes on CNN and is featured as one of their on the right normies. And he gets in little arguments with the other contestants on the show. It's finally out. Pew Research's 2024 election analysis. Here's a thread of some hot takes. Oh, yeah, so hot. Trump's base has nearly doubled with Hispanics and tripled with blacks since 2016, decreasing by 10 points among whites. Really? Trump's base has nearly doubled with Hispanics and tripled with blacks, but decreased by 10 points among whites. Now, again, they have no actual way of knowing any of this. So this is narrative building to reframe what we understand about the 2024 election. And part of this could be a push to attempt to invalidate Trump's presidency through these means that we've discussed over the past few weeks. There seems to be a movement on the left, on the regime's part, really, to call the 2024 election into question. That's just fine by me, because the 2024 election was a fake election. He goes on, Democrats have decreased a total of 6 points among blacks and Hispanics while increasing 4 points among whites. Does anyone actually believe that? And if somehow that's true, then every racial narrative in our country should probably be just overturned immediately. I mean, the racial narrative should be overturned because they're false, but there is no way in the world that white voters were like, well, we did like Trump, but now we're going to vote for Kamala Harris. That's nonsense. 15% of Biden 2020 voters didn't vote in 2024. 5% of those, I guess, voted for Trump. 5% of Biden voters, I should say. So 15% of Joe Biden's voters didn't vote. Let's just do the math on this. What is 81 million? What is 15% of 81 million? Let's see what the machine says. It is 12,150,000. So out of Biden's 81 million real lawful American votes that he definitely did not get, 12,150,000 of those did not vote in 2024. Did not vote at all in 2024. That's what we were told. And 5%, which would be 4,050,000, shifted and voted for Donald Trump. So immediately, Biden has lost 16,200,000 votes, which would take him down below 65 million. And that is much more in line with what Hillary Clinton got in 2016. It's like all those votes were fake and they were just being removed or something. Okay, let's keep going. 11% of Trump voters didn't vote in 2024. 3% voted for Harris. 11% of Trump voters. He was said to have had, 75 million votes or something like that? What was it, 74? Yeah, 74 million votes. 74, 75, something in there. So we're talking another 8 million votes there from Trump's turnout. Didn't vote at all. Well, that would have taken Trump from that 74, 75 down to, let's say, 67, 66, 67. He had received, we were told, 63 million votes in 2016, which you get closer to that if 3% voted for Harris. So 3% of Trump's voters in 2020 went and voted for Kamala. 14% of people who didn't vote in 2020 voted for Trump in 2024. 12% voted for Harris. So 26% of people who didn't vote in 2020 came out and voted in 2024, while 26% of people who did vote in 2020 decided to stay home in 2024. I don't know how anybody believes this shit. Americans who didn't vote in 2016 but did in 2020 supported Biden by 5 points. Americans who didn't vote in 2020 but did in 2024 supported Trump by 12 points. Oh, there's the major difference. Trump's support growth among certain demographics, 2016 to 2024, whites +1, blacks +9, Latinos +20, Asians +10 since 2020. White men dropped off -3. White men, -3% for Donald Trump from 2016 to 2024. How could anyone believe that? White women went up by 4, black men by 9, black women by 5, Latino men by 11, Latino women by 13%. And we can leave this here. We don't need to go through all of these numbers, but that link is available in my info stream over on Telegram, t.me/veryreasonable. You can search Pew, P-E-W, I think, and find that. Kelly and Oak comments, contestants on the show. Yeah, it's like a game show where they argue and they win social credit points online and probably fiat tokens from the machine. So I don't see what else they're doing. They're doing arguing contests within the false reality. Okay. Nothing they actually say is going to be true or good analysis. It's not going to make any sense because all their foundational premises and principles are non-existent. They exist only in the false reality. They don't connect and attach to reality prime whatsoever. But through the argument, an underlying truth is established in the mind of the viewer, because two of these people who could not hate each other more, who are screaming at each other on television about this disagreement they care so much about, they still agree about some of the underlying facts, and therefore those underlying facts are taken as true. That's the purpose of the exercise, and to ensure that there are these big emotionally connective cases on each side of the issue that therefore must keep us divided. The cable news is just the bottom of the barrel. I cannot believe people watch that to get informed about elections. It's ridiculous. All right, I'm going to play a new piece of video, but for that piece of video, I want to preface it with two old pieces of video. The first one is one you'll all be very familiar with from Donald Trump.
Sports has always been something that Americans rally around to come together. They really do. You won the popular vote. You won all the swing states. But still, Kamala Harris got 75 million votes in the country.
Well, if you believe the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just say
it is ridiculous
that the election was as
Brad,
it was.
Excuse me. There are 7 swing states. I won them all.
You did
by a lot.
But let me just get to the dismount here.
And I won the popular.
Have you thought?
All right. So you all know that clip very well. If you believe the whole thing is ridiculous. And the whole thing is ridiculous. Our elections are fake. Believing that Kamala got 75 million votes is an absurdity. Okay? No one should believe that. And if that means you don't have any idea of what happened in 2024, and you don't know how many voters there are in America, all of that, it's just in the trash because it's trash. Okay? You don't hold on to that and use it as though it's real. It's just trash. All analysis based on that is trash. All those numbers that Pew composed are trash. It's all just garbage. You don't need it. You cannot base your analysis on that. You cannot base your choices. You cannot make decisions on the basis of any of that. Okay? But we don't do that because we're so conditioned to think that traditional political analysis and all of these issues they talk about are important for us to know about and incorporate into our lives. They're not. The only thing we need to know about elections is they're fake. Okay? You don't need to know about the demographics. You don't need to know any of it because they're fake. Let's keep going. This was Scott Bessent from a couple of months ago.
Who was the president in 2024?
One believes President Biden.
One believes? You one of those non-believers that the election, the American people didn't vote?
I am one of those people who believes that the election was fake. I don't believe that the American people didn't vote, except to the extent that the process of voting doesn't produce a vote. So that's true in more than enough cases to assume that it's true in all cases. Why would they be like, okay, well, these people can have real votes? Maybe that's what they do. And then they pile in the rest of the fake votes. But every time you have a real vote that is canceled out with a fake vote, it's like you didn't vote. So voters, nonsense. People did go attempting to vote. Whether they voted or not is an unknown. Certainly a real election was not held. And Scott Bessent understands that, therefore, there was no governing authority ever conveyed in a legitimate way to the fake and illegitimate president, Joe Biden. Emil Bove sat for a hearing in Congress this week, and he too backed the Besant position.
Who won the 2020 election for President of the United States?
President Biden was certified as the winner of that election.
So you give the standard answer. You can't say that he won because he got the majority of votes and also got the Electoral College victory?
I think the characterizations that you just made, Senator, are both political, and so I can't address them under the canons, and they're also tied up in ongoing litigation.
Help me understand how it's political to state who got the most votes in any election.
Senator, I'm just trying to be precise. The process by which our country declares the victor in an election is a certification process. President Biden was certified.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Welch.
Yield back. Thank you.
Senator Black.
Okay. So President Biden was certified. That's the best he can do. Why is it political to give an answer about who won the most votes? Well, because you're only saying that if you're a supporter of the regime and its election system. You're not saying that if you're an honest person. You're not saying that if you are in the Trump administration, unless you want to be quickly out of the Trump administration for lying about something so important. I would not, if I was Emil Bove, and I'm sure that he knows better, and is really faithfully prepared to represent the truth, which is that Joe Biden did not win that election. As Donald Trump, the president, says in official statements all the time, I'm sure that he knows that truth. So therefore, it would be political to suggest that Joe Biden won in some legitimate fashion. It's obviously a political act. It has been that since these members of the Uniparty, these members of the regime and their supporters decided to go along with that obvious, ridiculous farce. Joe Biden, 81 million real lawful American votes. Crazy that people believe that. It really is. Donald Trump was asked about the 2020 election today. Hold for processing. And it's funny, actually, the person in the White House press briefing room was actually from Lindell TV.
Numbers that we're seeing.
And let me just pull us up to the appropriate time here. There we are.
2020 election, is there any more information on the special prosecutor? So many Americans still have questions about the 2020 election. And speaking of rogue judges, would you consider appointing somebody at DOJ maybe to investigate the judges that allowed for the political persecution of you, your family, and your supporters during the Biden administration?
I love you. Who are you?
I'm Kara from Lindell TV.
Well, it's just a very nice question. And it's not a setup. I have no idea who you are, but I appreciate that question. All I can say is we're not here for that. I hope so. I hope they're doing a thing because that election was rigged and stolen, and we can't allow that to happen. You know, a lot of people tell me, sir, you just won the greatest election in the history of our country. You won at numbers that won all 7 swing states, won the popular vote, won everything. Sir, go on with your life. And many people that say that, good people, friends of mine, then you have people that say that same thing, go on with your life, but you have to find out what happened because you can't let that happen again. Look at what this lunatic did. Look at what he did.
Got to find out what happened. You can't let this sort of thing happen again. And it shouldn't happen again. Again, I'm not attached to the idea of elections going forward. I'm not sure if that's a way to actually choose leaders. I don't believe that the leaders of the world are chosen that way. There's clearly a power struggle going on at a level higher than what we do at the fire station or the local elementary school on the first Tuesday in November. Okay? There's something else going on. It ain't that. So the elections, the psyop that we put ourselves through and participate in, we should be able to be mature about this and move on from that, okay? If there is some other way for the people to express their will and their decision-making, then that's wonderful. And maybe we can find one of those ways. It's also entirely possible right now, and people get a little bit put off by Donald Trump and his use of the word democracy, because we've heard so many times, our democracy, our democracy. We need to spread democracy around the world. We need to create democracies in the Middle East. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. That's why we have to support them and make sure that they never feel threatened, right? Democracy, democracy, democracy. But if you have it all, and you have systems, you have algorithms that can analyze all the information from the American public at any given moment, and that, I believe, is what's happening. I don't think there's any moment where people with ultimate access to information don't actually know what the American people do legitimately want at all times. And if they are responsive to that, as I believe Trump is, I actually think that that is what is going on behind all this. If they are responsive to that, then you have the potential for a direct democracy that you don't entirely understand how it got there, but it is a form of direct democracy nonetheless, because your input would then be part of that system. Got to think about the new ways that technology is going to affect this stuff. And a lot of people are adverse to technology. I am totally fine, by the way, with doing it the old-fashioned way, with paper ballots, showing up to vote, hand-marked, hand-counted, all the rest of it, very tiny precincts, very small elections. I get it. I'm just not sure that that's realistic when we begin talking about the scale of who governs a state, who governs the country. And who knows what the future is going to hold. Maybe in local elections, that stuff works fine. You know, I don't know if you've ever lived in a place that has an HOA. The elections in the HOA are probably rigged. Does anybody think that there's not influence going on behind the scenes? And I would bet that some of you in the chat probably have lived in a place where there is an HOA and have probably experienced this exact thing before. By the way, hello to all of you over on Substack and over on YouTube. I hope you're doing well over there. Checking in on Rumble. PXO had an interesting question that I think is worth answering. He said, what reason would you need to be sworn in again if you did once and never conceded? And he's referring, of course, to Donald Trump in 2025. Donald Trump did not ever concede after the 2020 election, and he won that election, so he should never concede. The election is still under contest. And let's just go through that Bove video one more time, because I failed to mention one of the most important parts of it. You can listen to him remark that it is still under litigation.
Right. He got the majority of votes and also got the Electoral College victory.
I think the characterizations that you just made, Senator, are both political, and so I can't address them under the canons, and they're also tied up in ongoing litigation.
Help me understand.
They're also tied up in ongoing litigation, and that matters. The 2020 election is still tied up in ongoing litigation, okay? No one should have taken over the presidency at any point, and no one did. Donald Trump has been there the entire time. We went through a fake election. Donald Trump is now publicly recognized as the president once again. This is exactly the scenario I laid out since 2022. So I still think that that's the case. I think hopefully that will all be proven so that it becomes common knowledge at some point. But it doesn't matter whether or not it's common knowledge. It matters whether or not it's functionally true. Okay? It doesn't matter whether other people understand it as true. If you understand it as true and your analysis flows from that understanding, then you will be right when other people are wrong. Okay? It's not a magic trick. It's just that you're going with the truth, whether or not the consensus agrees that it's true. So it's real simple. Donald Trump would not walk away and leave the country to a degenerate and illegitimate president, which would be what Joe Biden was if Joe Biden was not the thing that Joe Biden very likely is, which is just a tool that was totally under control the entire time. So does Trump then need to be sworn in a legitimate inauguration? Well, no, he doesn't. And there's also good reason to believe that he wasn't. There was the thing with John Roberts and the Bible during the oath. Then you've got J.D. Vance, who is just playing a role. Why would you need to inaugurate anyone in that scenario? We had the TV show. It was held inside the Capitol, which is different than normal. And the TV show was fine and everybody enjoyed it. And now we just continue going on with these processes. But no, I don't think that has anything to do with anything ultimately. T. Gretzky in the chat says, so if this is all proven, what happens in 2026? He is currently serving an unconstitutional third term. Well, first off, I think you're talking about 2028, and it is not unconstitutional to serve a third term. It is against a law that was put in place, the 22nd Amendment. Okay. All the amendments after number 10 are invalid. There's no way this stuff was properly ratified. It is ridiculous to play under the regime's rules as though they represent the founders' constitution. They do not. Okay. FDR served in 4 terms, right? Donald Trump doesn't have to leave. The unconstitutionality of this term is utterly irrelevant, and it should be disregarded by everyone. It should be argued against. You should not be making the regime's case for them on their behalf against Trump and against the American people and ultimately against the founders' constitution. Okay. So I don't know why people bring that up as like, oh, I know that they're not allowed to do that, or it's not right that they do that. We need term limits. No, we don't. And no, they don't. Okay. Sorry. We should not, term limits would not be necessary with legitimate elections. We should strive for legitimate elections and stop worrying about term limits. We should stop worrying about campaign finance. Bernie Sanders went on Joe Rogan like this past week at some point, maybe it was early in the week. Bernie Sanders is an old communist lunatic. He's been paid by the government for 60 years to be a communist. Why do people listen to that guy? He doesn't have their best interests at heart. He's just an old school populist, an old school communist who makes populist arguments. He has populist appeal. Okay. But the policies are terrible. He's not an honest man. It's ridiculous. The idea that campaign finance is the biggest problem. And it's funny because Rogan actually called him out. I saw some clip. I don't pay attention to Joe Rogan, generally speaking, but when the clips come up, sometimes I watch them, and Bernie Sanders is going off on campaign finance as always. And Rogan's like, well, didn't the Kamala Harris campaign spend like $2 billion, and didn't you support that? And Bernie's like, well, yeah, of course. I didn't say it was only a problem for one side. What are you going to do with these people? We have to move out of the prior understanding of politics that we have been indoctrinated to believe by the television. Okay. It's not real. Doesn't matter if the consensus ascribes to it or not. It doesn't matter if there are other people in the truth space who are like, oh, you can't take that seriously. You can't take those guys seriously. None of that's been proven true. Well, no shit. It hasn't been proven true to the general public, but proven true to the general public just means that the courts decided and the media reported it. That's like the only standard for truth for the general public. And that's no standard at all. So why would we form our beliefs in that fashion? Okay. And again, if you know something's true and the consensus doesn't agree, if that is enough to make you take the consensus position when figuring out what to do over the truth, well, then you're retarded. And it happens that there's a lot of people in the truth space who are retarded. And it's very sad. I wish that they were not retarded. And I wish that they weren't liars. And I wish they weren't grovelers. And I wish they weren't statists. But that's not the world we live in, unfortunately. So, it's one of those things in terms of forming public belief. Everybody still wants somebody to trust. They want to be able to trust the characters on TV. Don't trust any of those characters. I don't ask for your trust. I don't want your trust. I don't need your trust. Okay? I will make first principles arguments. And if you believe those arguments if those arguments appeal to you because you understand the validity of first principles arguments above and beyond whatever appears in a newspaper article or on television or what you were taught in elementary school, well, then you will side with me. And if you do, as long as I've made my arguments well, of course, using sound logic. And if I haven't, then obviously you can side with whatever. But at no point do you need to trust the sources because my case hasn't been, quote unquote, proven among a general public consensus. That's the wrong way to go about decision making. Okay. If everybody knows something and that thing happens to be wrong, and you're going to go with that in the making of your important decisions, then you're making a huge error in your life. Okay. Don't know how else to say it. And none of this stuff, most of it at least, is not personal. There are some characters out there who are just really awful. And it doesn't, it's irrelevant ultimately. But most of it's not personal. People, if you're going to call yourself a truther, then you should be focused on logic and first principles and be honest about what it is you actually know and what it is you don't know. A lot of people think they know things are true because they appear in official government documents. How dumb is that? It's a good resource to understand, okay, well, here is information among other information. But a government document is not decisive, okay? We talked about this stuff when the files were coming out, when we were getting JFK and RFK files. What happened to all of that? Well, nothing happened to all of it, okay? These files, these records kept by an intelligence community group, whether it's CIA or some other group, or various agencies within the federal bureaucracy or the Defense Department, whatever it is, the White House even, whatever it is, there's no guarantee that that record represents a truth in reality prime just because a record was made. Okay, false records can be made all the time. Imagine how many false records must exist as a product of the fake and illegitimate Biden administration. And I'm not even just talking about the auto pen stuff. Think about all the documents their agencies produced, all the opinion that goes in, all the ideology that goes in, all the manipulation that goes in. Okay? There's no reason to believe any of that is honest or real. And I'm sorry, again, it sucks that that's a problem. Same thing with the schooling. Sucks that that's a problem, but it is a problem. You can't just march ahead as though it's not a problem and all those documents are therefore true and can be relied upon. And the people who do that run into some really big problems eventually because they are waiting to make decisions on their idea of what constitutes truth when their idea of what constitutes truth is just obviously philosophically and epistemologically invalid. Okay. And so we got to get past that. That is the biggest hurdle to get over. And I understand that it still negatively affects a great many people. And I'm probably subject to it myself at times, although I try more than anything else to adhere to that. Okay. And I think that it's produced reasonable results thus far. Whereas the opposite approach continues to produce absolutely terrible analysis at every turn. I don't know what to say anymore about all of that stuff. You got to spot it yourself at some point. And when you do spot it, it's probably time to start ignoring the people who continue to rely on all of that as though at some point the truth will be proven and then it becomes the truth. And right now it's not the truth. Okay. Joe Biden did not win the 2020 election. At no point is that ever going to be anything other than true. Okay. He did not win a legitimate election. You can use that truth in your analysis and operate on the basis of that truth and encourage other people to adhere to that truth. Or you can participate in the consensus reality, which is a false one, and be wrong all the time. Everyone's got to make their own decisions. Okay. One last story before we get into the geopolitical realm. I thought I was on a good pace here. And maybe I have disrupted that pace with my tangents. This is Politico today. Gavin Newsom sues Fox News for $787 million in defamation case over Trump. Here's the subheadline, and this is the important part. The amount is nearly identical to Dominion Voting's 2023 defamation settlement with Fox. It's not nearly identical. It's identical. The California governor accused Fox News of defamation in a lawsuit Friday morning, alleging the network should fork over $787 million after host Jesse Waters claimed Newsom lied about his phone calls with Trump, who ordered National Guard troops to Los Angeles this month. Newsom's lawyers argue Waters' program misleadingly edited a video of Trump to support the claim. The Democratic likely presidential hopefuls, request for damages is nearly identical to the $787.5 million sum Fox News paid Dominion Voting Systems in 2023 to settle another defamation case over election falsehoods. And it comes amid a spate of lawsuits from Trump against major media and other companies that resulted in multi-million-dollar settlements. Okay, well, this sounds to me like a proof of the "our boy knew" concept, okay? Gavin Newsom. Now, you got to remember, the Fox Dominion suit was a settlement, a friendly settlement from two parties, both of which ultimately represent the regime and do not want to overthrow the election system. Fox had evidence from Dominion's own filings and records that during discovery, that Dominion knew its machines could not produce a reliable election outcome. And at that point, the game is over. Okay, there's no way you can prove defamation if a fact like that exists in Dominion's discovery. So they had a friendly settlement to the tune of $787.5 million. Now, Gavin Newsom is taking that exact same sum that Fox News relinquished to Dominion, and he's saying, you know what? You lied in the same way about me. Go ahead and give me $787 million. I would thank Gavin Newsom for doing this. Now, I don't want good things for Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom is a terrible governor. I tried to have him recalled. He is only there as a product of stolen elections. And because of that, I believe he's fully under control and being used under the our boy model. And I've been saying this for years. I think stuff like this indicates that's probably true. This is not some mistake. The amount is not some mistake. This is all scripted and planned out. I don't know what the court result is going to be, and I don't care to speculate on it. But there is clearly something more going on here. And I think that is going to be quite interesting to see how this plays out. Okay, let us continue. So Trump went to Europe in the middle of the week to attend the NATO summit. And there were some interesting clips worth playing from that summit. Here is the first and most viral of those clips.
May do papers on it, Marco. Maybe we're going to do papers. I don't even know if you need them. They're not going to be fighting each other. They've had it. They've had a big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes. Then it's easier to stop them.
And then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language.
You have to use strong language. Every once in a while, you have to use a certain word.
I think we have to join the others.
So he's being asked about Israel and Iran and whether or not he would need to sign an agreement, and talking about like this schoolyard fight. Sometimes you have to let them fight for a few minutes and then they'll settle down and you can make an agreement. And Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, says sometimes daddy needs to come in and use strong language. And of course, the day before, Trump had just dropped the F-bomb. So Mark Rutte referred to Trump. Trump would be the daddy in that position. But I don't think that Rutte was calling Trump daddy, though that's how it was expressed and disseminated online rather hilariously. And speaking of hilarious, one person who agreed that it was hilarious was Marco Rubio. And hopefully I will be able to find that clip. Where did it go? Here it is.
News. Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, who is your friend, he called you daddy earlier. Do you regard your NATO
Look at Rubio
allies
in the background.
as kind of children?
No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No? He did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
Do you regard your NATO allies, though, as kind of like children, and they're obviously listening to you and they're spending more, and you're obviously appreciative of that, but do you hope that actually they're going to be able to defend themselves, defend Europe on their own without...
I think they need help a little bit at the beginning.
And his answer to that was actually pretty good. I didn't pull it because you can assume the answer, of course. Yes, I would like them to be able to take care of themselves, but we have this alliance. And of course, our role is to take care of them right now and to bring them more into the fold when it comes to their skin in the game. But Marco Rubio is just losing it back there the entire time, and that is hilarious. As for the NATO countries being thought of as children, well, I mean, how are you supposed to think of them? They can't defend themselves, and they always have to call on their big brother or their daddy to come help them. So whether or not he considers them children, that is certainly the role that they are playing. All right, let's get a little bit more serious. This is Pete Hegseth at NATO.
Did you not have a public opponent to your Zelensky meeting for a tactical reason with President Putin?
Let him answer this.
Hello, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah. There's a reason the president calls out fake news for what it is. These pilots, these refuelers, these fighters, these air defenders, the skill and the courage it took to go into enemy territory flying 36 hours on behalf of the American people and the world to take out a nuclear program is beyond what anyone in this audience can fathom. And then the instinct of CNN, the instinct of the New York Times is to try to find a way to spin it for their own political reasons, to try to hurt President Trump or our country. They don't care what the troops think. They don't care what the world thinks. They want to spin it to try to make him look bad based on a leak. Of course, we've all seen plenty of leakers. And what do leakers do? They have agendas. And what do? Do they share the whole information or just the part that they want to introduce? And when they introduce that preliminary report that's deemed to be a low assessment, you know what a low assessment means? Low confidence in the data in that report. And why is there low confidence? Because all of the evidence of what was just bombed by 12 30,000-pound bombs is buried under a mountain, devastated and obliterated. So if you want to make an assessment of what happened at Fordo, you better get a big shovel and go really deep, because Iran's nuclear program is obliterated. And somebody somewhere is trying to leak something to say, oh, with low confidence, we think maybe it's moderate. Those that dropped the bombs precisely in the right place know exactly what happened when that exploded. And you know who else knows? Iran. That's why they came to the table right away, because their nuclear capabilities have been set back beyond what they thought were possible because of the courage of a commander-in-chief who led our troops, despite what the fake news wants to say.
Okay, so we're going to get to all of that stuff in a second. I should have grouped that clip with the Israel-Iran stuff rather than the NATO stuff, but c'est la vie. Let's go to this from Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Now, look at what's happening in the Western countries. They keep burying Russia, but they're going to die themselves. They keep burying us, not noticing that they're dying out themselves. Look, we have 4.3% GDP growth last year, and the year before that, 4.1. This year, to fight inflation, we're going to see a lower GDP, but across the Eurozone, it's 0.5% growth. In some of the largest economies in Europe, in Germany, in France, they're basically teetering on the brink of inflation. Or look at the armed forces. They keep telling us, everyone, that we are having some problems, that they need to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia. They keep saying that all the time, even today. At the same time, they're saying that that we are somehow going to attack NATO countries. So if our armed forces, according to them, is falling apart, how are we going to attack NATO, according to them? Again, they're talking nonsense. They're trying to persuade their own public, their own people, that we are trying to attack them. They do that because they want more money from their people. So they because they have to pay more and more in the public sphere, in the social. We use a lot of money, of course, to maintain. What they are doing is we're using our money to defend ourselves, and the European countries are waiting their money, sending it to the United States and supporting the militaries of the United States. Now, what we are planning to do is we're going to decrease our spending on defense in the next 3 years.
All right. So Putin and the relation there to NATO, and it's good news that people can't, generally speaking, hear my dog snoring in the chat. Although he lets out a big one every now and then. He's a funny little guy. Okay, let's pause for just a second and do one of these here Rumble ads. Always got to support Rumble when Rumble is here to support us. If you still haven't tried 1775 coffee, now's your shot. The 1775 starter kit just dropped, only 1,000 units. You're getting the bold dark roast that hits harder than a CNN fact check, smooth medium roast, and the Vitality Mushroom coffee for clean energy and laser focus. No crash. All single origin, small batch, toxin free, and mold free. Plus, you're also getting a gold spoon clip because freedom isn't scooped with plastic, a frother strong enough to stir up your coffee and your mother-in-law's political opinions, and a black 1775 tumbler that says, I don't take life advice or caffeine from a woke sea witch. $170 worth of coffee and gear, yours for $99. This is for the ones who've been watching 1775 blow up on Rumble, wondering if it's actually worth it. Spoiler alert, it is. Go to 1775coffee.com/studio and grab your starter kit before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something, just like Rumble does. Start your day with coffee that actually backs what you believe. And thank you, Rumble, for making life a little better for the... Okay. One more, and then we'll get into Israel, Iran. And this is kind of a story that people are not really paying a lot of attention to. I think I might spend some time on this over the weekend. I really, actually, you know what? Let me just do this right now, and I'll see if I can find anything on this. This is the sort of issue that I would think the International Crisis Group has been all over, maybe for years, and influencing for years. And of course, there are countless articles, 29 articles on Rwanda and the conflict with Congo. So this is, and spanning years, of course. This is the Associated Press from earlier today. Congo and Rwanda sign a U.S.-mediated peace deal aimed at ending decades of bloody conflict. The Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda on Friday signed a peace deal facilitated by the U.S. to help end the decades-long deadly fighting in eastern Congo, while helping the U.S. government and American companies gain access to critical minerals in the region. So that is very interesting. The minerals, the resources in Africa are always a key factor when it comes to the world superpowers that are supporting those individual countries. We've talked about this numerous times with various countries being backed by Russia and China, part of the kind of new China Silk Road project that's going to span Eurasia, the Middle East, and Africa. We talked about the land bridge across Africa of countries that had kicked out the global regime and the former colonial nations there. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called it an important moment after 30 years of war. Earlier Friday, President Donald Trump said at a news conference that he was able to broker a deal for one of the worst wars anyone's ever seen. I was able to get them together and sell it, Trump said. And not only that, we're getting for the United States a lot of mineral rights in Congo. The deal has been touted as an important step toward peace in the Central African nation of Congo, where conflict with more than 100 armed groups, the most potent backed by Rwanda, has killed millions since the 1990s. It's also at the heart of Trump's push to gain access to critical minerals needed for much of the world's technology at a time when the United States and China are actively competing for influence in Africa. Analysts see the deal as a major turning point, but don't believe it will quickly end the fighting. So I guess we shall see as far as that goes. Okay. Let's get into some Israel and Iran stuff, and I hope that I can get through most of this. This is Donald Trump from Wednesday afternoon. Now, I've said many times, Our Boy Blue, I think Burning Bright coined that, and then began using the same model for Zelensky, which I think is accurate. And we might see that it goes even further than the Our Boy model. I think then maybe it went to Justin Trudeau. I'm not sure if he did that first. He might have. I think he did. And then I added Our Boy New, which is Gavin Newsom, and Our Boy Yuhu, which is Benjamin Netanyahu. And so let's go first to Our Boy Yuhu. This is Donald Trump on Truth Social with one of the longest posts I've ever seen him make. This is from Wednesday afternoon, as I said. Breaking news. I was shocked to hear that the state of Israel, which has just had one of its greatest moments in history and is strongly led by Bibi Netanyahu, is continuing its ridiculous witch hunt against their great wartime prime minister, ! Bibi and I just went through hell together, finding a very tough and brilliant longtime enemy of Israel. And Bibi could not have been... I'm reading terribly now. It's about the time where I start reading terribly. Fighting a very tough and brilliant longtime enemy of Israel, Iran, and Bibi could not have been better, sharper, or stronger in his love for the incredible Holy Land. Anybody else would have suffered losses, embarrassment, and chaos. Bibi Netanyahu was a warrior like perhaps no other warrior in the history of Israel. And the result was something that nobody thought was possible, a complete elimination of potentially one of the biggest and most powerful nuclear weapons anywhere in the world. And it was going to happen soon. We were fighting literally for the survival of Israel. And there is nobody in Israel's history that fought harder or more competently than Bibi Netanyahu. Despite all of this, I just learned that Bibi has been summoned to court on Monday for the continuation of this long-running. He's been going through this horror show since May of 2020, unheard of. This is the first time a sitting Israeli prime minister has ever been on trial. Politically motivated case, long-running politically motivated case concerning cigars, a Bugs Bunny doll, and numerous other unfair charges, all of that in quotes, in order to do him great harm. Such a witch hunt for a man who has given so much is unthinkable to me. He deserves much better than this, and so does the state of Israel. Bibi Netanyahu's trial should be canceled immediately, or a pardon given to a great hero who has done so much for the state. Perhaps there is no one that I know who could have worked in better harmony with the President of the United States, me, than Bibi Netanyahu. It was the United States of America that saved Israel, and now it is going to be the United States of America that saves Bibi Netanyahu. This travesty of justice cannot be allowed. Now, that is an awfully bold and interesting statement. And in the first half of that statement, talks about the fight that Benjamin Netanyahu has put up. Then he goes in to talking about how long this witch hunt has been ongoing since May of 2020. And you'll remember that one of the things I go back to often is that I think all of these issues were settled in the way that they're being settled and the way they're being presented to us a very long time ago in 2020. I think that all this stuff with Israel and the Middle East was worked out back then. There has been an ongoing color revolution in Israel. There have been prosecutions of Netanyahu. They have been trying to mold and change the court so that the court becomes the supreme body of governance in Israel, much the way it is in Brazil. We've been talking about this for years on this podcast, okay? Tracking all of these things. Never with the idea that Benjamin Netanyahu was a good guy, and he might not be a good guy, and all the history that suggests he was not a good guy may well be true, though we have no reason to believe that it is, okay? The news stories produced about guys who seem like our enemies are not valid because those guys seem like our enemies. They're fake news just like everything else is fake news, okay? So we have to let go of some of that. We can use it as information among other information, but it is not authoritative information on which we should base all our other beliefs on characters, on situations, on the rest of it. If we do that, we are setting ourselves up for disaster because all of that is uncertain information. It is unreliable information communicated to us only by liars, all right? So we always go back to the macro pattern. We always go back to first principles. We always make sure that we're using sound logic. And when we know that a piece of information is unreliable and we're going to base our argument on that piece of information, we are dooming ourselves in the world of logic and first principles, okay? It cannot be a first principles understanding that is derived based on some fact that we learned about some character from 15 or 20 years ago, set through by the fake news and promoted by the global regime that has its own interests, okay? Donald Trump could be in place for the next 20 years, and in 20 years, someone looking back on the fake news or in 25 years or 30 years, whatever it is, I don't think in real life he could be president for that long because he's too old, okay? I'm just saying an example. If you went back to the mainstream news, to the consensus central narrative history from 2015, 2016, 2017, or even before, it does not therefore indicate that that information was true because it's old and it remained in the central narrative, right? So we can't use that to judge a character. If they do that with Donald Trump in 20 years or 30 years or 50 or 100, they would be referring to fake news and believing it to be true. That would be a massive error. Okay, so we should not make that error at any point. So we have to immediately put that stuff off to the side. It's not that you disregard it completely. It's just that you don't use it to form firm conclusions. All right. So that stuff has to be left alone. So the witch hunt's been ongoing. The witch hunt is exactly like the witch hunt we saw Donald Trump undergo. All this stuff is scripted. All this stuff is controlled. You should understand that the scripts are the same. Therefore, the story being told is very likely the same. Therefore, with the pattern, we can match which characters are involved in which parts of the pattern. And as we do that, we begin to understand more about the situation that is totally foreign to us. No amount of study can surpass what we can gain through the macro pattern. And the macro pattern is the regime's way of taking over and then controlling countries over time, and then all of the stories that are being disseminated to unwind that, okay? That stuff, and you don't have to agree with me, all right? Go your own way, but I'm never going to follow anything other than that, okay? And then we don't have to get bogged down in the details of complete and total fictions, and we don't have to get involved in who's the secret white hat and who's the secret black hat, all right? It's worth understanding that there are possibilities that people who might even be our enemies can be fully controlled by our side, okay? And so in that viewpoint, then, it's not, we should not be focusing our efforts toward making sure that that enemy is punished. We should focus our efforts on understanding the situation, which we can't do if we've come to firm conclusions based on bad prior information. So how to deal with Benjamin Netanyahu? Well, he is clearly the subject of a push to take him out of power or to delegitimize him for as long as he remains in power, just like they did with Donald Trump. So this stuff is being pushed to the fore. Why are they trying to get Bibi out of there? Well, Bibi might be on board with Donald Trump, whereas the global regime and the regime in Israel, as it has commonly been since the creation of that proxy state 80 years ago, they might all be against Bibi because they want war. They want the Iranian threat. They want this stuff to go on forever. And Bibi doesn't seem to want that. Bibi seems open to alternatives. So are Trump and Bibi therefore aligned, at least on that? Well, yeah, it seems like they are. So could they be aligned on more things? Yeah, got to think that they probably can be. All right. So I hope that helps you understand how I get there. I am not. It's also possible that people have just been compromised or controlled in some way, and their prior character may be entirely real. He may be one of the most evil men who has ever existed, who also happens to be doing all the necessary things right now to advance the program against that. That's entirely possible. Okay. It's also possible all that was fake news. All that matters right now is how this process is proceeding forward and what we can learn by understanding the larger patterns. All right. Another interesting post. Actually, hold on. I'm going to share one of my posts from this week in response to what I believe Donald Trump is doing with the discussion that we hear from Trump. We hear it from Hegseth. We hear it from Kane. We hear it from Bannon and others about these B-2 bombers and the pilots who flew them, okay? These are the focus of this story. They're an assist in cementing the reality of that story. Certainly the pilots are playing that role, and the planes are as well. And I think that there's a reason Donald Trump and the rest of the communications op is focused on the B-2. And I said Trump is up-branding the B-2, I think. We have an unimaginable plane as a good deterrent for war. And so by up-branding, he is attempting to increase the reputational standing of the B-2 to the sort of plane that, if you have it, can evade all defenses and strike against nuclear targets without, in this case, leaving any radiological contamination event behind. Okay? That's a major thing, because then, of course, you can take out other nuclear facilities. We have an unimaginable plane. It would be like rock, paper, scissors, and the nuclear threat from any nation was scissors, and the B-2 is just the rock. Well, every time these two contest one another, the rock always wins. I think I got the rock, paper, scissors reference right. I was about to use paper. Like rock beats paper. No, wait. See, in rock, paper, scissors, rock should beat both paper and scissors, obviously, because it's a rock. And paper's really weak, and scissors are less weak, but, weak enough to be destroyed by rock. So, weird game, but I think you understand my meaning there. Let's continue. I said it's also a narrative inoculation against believing that new countries are creating a nuke threat. I mean, there was no radiological contamination event because the labs were so deep in the mountains. That's why there's only the holes. There's no radiological contamination event. If there is no radiological contamination event, then there is no reason not to destroy other weapons and other facilities. The nuclear deterrent is gone. The world will understand, because of Trump's upbranding, the B-2 as a super weapon. This would end the nuclear threat narrative permanently. Very similar to how the vaccine narrative was destroyed. Who's still afraid of climate change? Idiots. Trump will end up to this today, but I think he's dismantling the very natural disaster existential threat narrative as well by removing some of these so-called weather tracking technologies and these government agencies that are responsible for tracking this weather that they also might be creating. And if we get to the point where we find out that these hurricanes were government initiated. You know, I call these things construction projects for a reason. Okay. They have a hurricane and then they rebuild, and all the money flows in, all the federal government money, all the corporate money. There's all of this prime real estate where all the buildings just got wiped out. People can't go back to their homes. They take pittances as payoffs. And now that land can just be sucked up by real estate developers into construction projects. Same thing with fires in California. Same things with events that we're told are acts of war in the Middle East and elsewhere. They're construction projects. Are there real natural disasters? I'm fine if there are real natural disasters, but there may well also be fake natural disasters. And if we discover there are fake natural disasters, believing that the rest of them are real, it's kind of retarded. Okay. You should never, ever give the government the benefit of the doubt. Never give the regime. I don't know. Okay. I might have glitched out there for a second, but I hope that I'm all right here. Okay. And Starborn was not familiar with Yoo-hoo. Yes, Yoo-hoo, like the drink. Yeah, I even put the hyphen in it. It's YOO hyphen HOO. Like not quite like wee-wees and hoo-ha's, but our boy Yoo-hoo is just so much fun. Okay, let's go to General Raising Cane. And I'm going to cut forward in this clip just a bit. All right, let's start here. I only want to call your attention to the fact that after we talked about Top Gun Maverick all last week, and then saw on Saturday night the culmination of the Top Gun Maverick narrative with this super specific strike where these ultra high-tech planes came in, escaped everyone. No one even knew they were there, dropped their bombs perfectly and got all the way back home, just like Top Gun Maverick. Well, not exactly like, because then Tom Cruise, he gets shot down and whatever. I don't want to, spoiler alert. Here is Raising Cane referencing the Top Gun movies in the press conference with Pete Hegseth yesterday.
National Guard. The crews ranked from captain to colonel, and most were graduates of the Air Force Weapons School headquartered at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. I will state for the record that there is no beach volleyball or football at the Air Force Weapons School. They were male and female.
Beach volleyball and beach football. Beach volleyball was in Top Gun 1 and beach football was in Top Gun Maverick. So could also be a knock against the Navy right there, but definitely, absolutely a Top Gun reference. Now, we've been tracking Steve Bannon pretty carefully on his response to the Israel and Iran event. I think that he is leading the narrative, and he actually says in either this clip or the next one, I think it's this one, exactly what he is doing, which is battling against that regime narrative, that uniparty right narrative, the neocon narrative, the Israeli establishment narrative that I just mentioned a minute ago, that it does not seem like Netanyahu is a part of, although he is still the avatar for that as the leader of Israel. Okay.
Day war is over. I mean, he was adamant. Boom, over. I did what we had to do, got it done. I promised for, I think he said 15 years to do that. It's obliterated. We're moving on. And there's going to be tremendous pressure put on President Trump's administration, boots on the ground, regime change. You watch. The Israel first crowd over at Fox is going to be relentless, and we're going to make sure we're here to blunt it. That's why they're all worked up. They're leaking oil because we shut down their regime change, which they wanted to go to. In fact, if there's regime change, right, we think every country ought to do it. Maybe in Jerusalem they should start thinking about that. I don't know how Netanyahu's government, this Washington Post story has got to be refuted. I don't know how anybody can.
And by the way, understand that right there. He's talking about regime change potentially for Netanyahu. I think I said the other day that it sounds to me like they're going for regime change and in both Iran and Israel, making it seem like regime change in Iran has to happen. And because Netanyahu wasn't willing to go that far, well, we need to get rid of Netanyahu. Okay. Now, Bannon is going to be publicly anti-Netanyahu no matter what, as this thing goes with all of these narratives. All right. And again, Netanyahu could be a bad guy, but he does seem like he's under control. Regardless, you can't just say, well, this guy's our friend now, and those Fox News people and these other people in Israel, they are the real enemy. You got to include Netanyahu as the avatar. I think that's what Bannon's doing.
Deal with them until the CIA comes out. We got to talk about exactly what information was put forward on that critical time of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of a couple of weeks ago, particularly led up to the bombing. So, and I think everybody's in agreement. It needs to be a major reset. If you're a protectorate, you got to act like a protectorate. And Israel is a protectorate, right? They're not. We don't have an alliance with them. And the one time, and President Trump will tell you this, on Soleimani, Netanyahu backed out at the last second, did not have President Trump's back in the very last moment.
And that is how that story goes. Israel did not back Trump on taking out Soleimani. And it was that assassination of Soleimani that caused the retaliation by Iran that intentionally missed the U.S. military base, that laid down the model for what we just witnessed over the past couple of weeks. The same model that Trump referenced countless times in rally speeches since 2020. Again, that event happened in early 2020, January of 2020. So we're talking about all the events from back then. There's a couple clips of Bannon I want to go through, and I don't mean to take too much time on this because there's still a lot to get to. Damn, I'm never going to get through all of this. Oh, man. Okay. Let's just keep going. We're just going to plow through and do what we can.
In the media, which is the information arm of the globalist, and particularly the deep state, especially when you talk about the Pentagon. They do not want this war to be over. Because remember, 3/4 of the people in that room are from smaller publications, specialty publications that focus on defense. All of their advertisers are the defense industry. If you look at the mainstream media, and you go over to Fox News, you see Grumman and Martin Marietta and, or all the new, because they're all combined into 3 companies, right? Lockheed, Martin, all of it. They've all combined into 3 huge companies. They're taking ads all the time. You don't see those ads on War Room. Not going to take them, just like we don't take pharma ads. We wouldn't take pharma sponsors or defense industry sponsors. They're paid by the weapons industry. It's like MSNBC, having Fauci up there. You watch MSNBC at night. Each advertising segment's got 2 or 3 bizarro ads from the big pharma. The media is 100% captured over at the Pentagon for the weapons and arms manufacturers. They want the war to continue. President Trump, what this briefing showed once again, total obliteration, one and done. It's over. The 12-day war is over, and President Trump and the country are moving on. There's not going to be any, the search. We're going to do the search now for the material because they had trucks outside. We're going to do a search for material. Maybe we need dev groups. We need SEAL Team 6 and some EOD specialists to go over and help the IDF, the Israeli commandos. No, if you want to go do it yourself. There's not regime change. Not going to do it. President Trump said it. Total obliteration. And the 12-day war is over.
12-day war is over. They want it to continue. He talks about the sponsorship of these media outlets. People still try to argue to me that Fox News still has these good hosts and it's worth watching. They're just waking up the normies. No, they're not. They're keeping people asleep on behalf of the military-industrial complex, on behalf of globalist neocons. That's what they're doing. All right? To the extent they're waking anybody up at all, It's A, by accident, and B, about things that don't interfere with the rest of their agenda. So none of it can be trusted, okay? I don't know what it's going to take for people to turn off the television. I really don't. Let's go to Steve Witkoff, talking about the potential that the end of this conflict could bring.
The President's key objectives is that the Abraham Accords be expanded, that more countries come into it, and we are working on that on my team and in coordination with the Secretary of State and the entire State Department. And we think we're going to have some pretty big announcements on countries that are now coming into the Abraham Peace Accords. And we're hoping for normalization across an array of countries that maybe people would have never contemplated would come in. So we're excited for that prospect. That will also be a stabilizer in the Middle East.
So the potential to expand the Abraham Accords, which is a normalization with Israel and a recognition of Israel as a state, that would be going toward the two-state solution. I've said a number of times now, there's almost 150 countries in the world, part of the UN. The UN is irrelevant in that sense, but 150 UN countries, roughly, already recognize Palestine as a state. And about the same amount recognize Israel as a state. There are countries that don't recognize one or don't recognize the other. And to finally get a solution that leaves Israel intact would require a two-state solution, because there's no way that the Palestinian state is going away. The Israeli state was created 80 years ago as a global regime proxy state. So it's possible that it'll go away. I don't think it's going to. I think they're going to come to a two-state solution. And I think that that's what these Abraham Accords represent, a culmination of this peace process that was ultimately completed 5 years ago. I think that we'll see that we're going to go through in a second among some of the countries, but we could even see it with Iran. And I think that that's why this is all such a big deal. Iran is meant to be coming to the White House. Netanyahu is meant to be coming to the White House. If Iran's leaders and Netanyahu are there on the same day, meeting together and signing an Abraham Accord, that's a pretty big deal. Trump is already touting the fact that he solved the fake, obviously, war that was going to happen between India and Pakistan, two nuclear nations. Serbia and Kosovo, he talks about often. Rwanda and Congo now, and Israel, Iran, Israel with the whole Middle East. He's going to have all of those under his belt, and then he probably won't win the Nobel Peace Prize, so that we can cease talking about that ridiculous narrative device forever, because the Nobel Peace Prize is nothing. All right, now, geez. All right, I hope you guys will bear with me. I'm going to try to get through all of this quickly, but I really do think all of it's relevant. This is Bannon. Once again, we're going to do two more Bannon clips here, because, you know, when he's crushing it, he's crushing it. And the other thing is, he is a narrative setter on our side, on the true MAGA side, not the neocon side that says they're MAGA, but on true MAGA. Bannon is a narrative setter. People should listen to him and take him seriously. And instead, there are still people out there trying to make fun of him and pretend that he is the enemy. And all of those people are Israel First neocons. So I guess to that extent, it's not very surprising. Here we are. All right. Actually, that is not it. Let's do, do I have two clips saved as the same thing? I thought I had this nailed down. Let's just go here. All right. This will suit us, and then we'll move on.
More evidence comes out, particularly Mossad gave an incredible interview. Citizen Kane linked to it. It's if you haven't read it, you ought to read it, because it goes through details of how infiltrated they were to Iran, how they took down the Iranian scientists, and they did everything, all that. But there's a big self-own in that article. There's no smoking gun on a sense of urgency of what exactly was happening. I actually call now that the nuclear plan, I think if you look at it, and it's the reason Tulsi Gabbard's not up there today, but John Ratcliffe, the entire nuclear industrial plan, a scientific plan, I think it's a MacGuffin. I think it's that strategic thing in a movie like the Maltese Falcon or Casablanca, where, we got to get the passports, or we have to get the Maltese Falcon. It's just a device to drive the narrative. And you realize it's really not important and it's a physical thing, but it's not really important in the real world. I think the whole program's been a MacGuffin.
I think that the whole nuclear program has been a MacGuffin. It is just a writing device in a story that drives the plot, but it is not itself critical to the plot. It's not even, in some cases, a real thing. And calling the nuclear threat, the nuclear narrative, a MacGuffin, hey, man, I didn't say it this time. That was Steve Bannon saying it. Steve Bannon was one of Trump's closest advisors on the first campaign. And we're told that he somehow was not an advisor for these last, 8 years. Does anybody believe that? He's been the single most important MAGA media figure in the last 5 years with no one else anywhere close. There's no one else even to mention. And people would be like, well, what about Tucker Carlson? Is Tucker Carlson even MAGA? I wouldn't bet my life on that. And I'm not even trying to besmirch Tucker Carlson. Give me a break. Bannon is the guy. And involved with Rich Higgins and Ezra Cohen Watnick and Derek Harvey in terms of rooting out the deep state. And Rich Higgins has passed, sadly. But Ezra and Colonel Harvey still go on war route. Are they there by accident? What is it that these people believe that Bannon is somehow a bad guy? It's crazy. Just take Mark Levin's word for it. Okay, let's blaze through some things here. Oh, apparently that one's not gonna blaze through any of that. ABC News just, I guess, got rid of that article. Let me see if I can find this one more time because it was kind of somewhat important to what I was about to set up. So I was talking about how Netanyahu seems like he is separate and distinct from the neocon effort in Israel. Man, disappointing. So I want to talk about the defense minister, Israel Katz, and he has been talking about how they wanted to seek the Ayatollah out and assassinate him, but they did not get a chance. And we will come back to Katz in just a few minutes, but the article I wanted to kick things off with is mysteriously gone, and I can't locate it quickly. So let's just continue. This is the Times of Israel from Wednesday. Iran says 700 arrested for wartime ties with Israel. 3 alleged Mossad agents hanged. Now, Brian and I went through the Reuters report on this a bit this morning. Reuters just calls those 3 men Kurdish and does not refer to them as Mossad agents, which I think is interesting. Just going to hit a couple pieces of this article. Iran has, over the last 12 days, arrested more than 700 people accused of ties with Israel. State-linked media reported Wednesday in the wake of a ceasefire between the two countries that cut short almost 2 weeks of war. Since the beginning of Israel's attack on Iran, the Zionist regime's spy network has been highly active in the country, said Fars News reporting on the arrests. Additionally, the Islamic Republic on Wednesday morning executed 3 people it accused of collaborating with Israel, its judiciary's Mizan News agency announced. Skipping down. Tehran regularly announces the arrest and execution of agents suspected of working for foreign intelligence services, including Israel, a country it regularly vows to destroy. Got to add that in there. Yes, sure, the country's been entirely infiltrated by Israeli intelligence assets, but it's only because Iran is always vowing to destroy Israel. Iran is the world's second most prolific executioner after China, according to human rights groups, including Amnesty International. And China is also going after infiltrators and corrupt politicians. She's been going after Chinese Communist Party corruption for 10 years, 12 years. It also carried out executions of men accused of being Mossad agents on both Sunday and Monday, after Israel attacked Iran on June 13th in order to thwart what it deemed the existential threats of Iran's nuclear and ballistic missiles program, Tehran vowed swift trials for people arrested on suspicion of collaboration. And of course, that is something you would do as a responsible country. You know, it's painted because Iran is the evil regime, and these are executions we're talking about. Therefore, the executions must be of good guys and must be a very bad thing, a moral evil, etc. But that is exactly what you would expect a responsible country to do if it was finding enemy combatants all over the place, especially high-level ones. This is Bloomberg from Wednesday. Iran's defense minister visits China for the first time since the war. So just keep that in mind. We can leave that article. We don't need to go deeply into that. Let's keep going. This is Donald Trump yesterday in an event that wasn't at all about this, but here we go.
You and Howard and Scott are working overtime, making deals with other countries. Remember a few months ago, the press was saying, do you really have anybody of any interest? Well, we just signed with China yesterday, right? Just signed with China. We have everybody. We're not going to make deals with everybody. Some we're just going to send them a letter, say, thank you very much. You're going to pay 25, 35, 45%. That's the easy way to do it. And my people don't want to do it that way. They want to do some of it, but they want to make more deals than I would do. But we're having some great deals. We have one coming up, maybe with India, very big one, where we're going to open up India. In the China deal, we're starting to open up China, things that never really could have happened. And the relationship with every country has been very good.
That's as big as it gets. China trade deal, is it? He said it's signed. Here is CNBC. China confirms details of U.S. trade deal. This is from this morning. The U.S. and China have confirmed details of a trade framework that seeks to allow rare earth exports and easing of tech restrictions, according to a statement released by China's Ministry of Commerce on Friday afternoon. China will review and approve export applications for items subject to export control rules, while the U.S. will correspondingly cancel a range of existing restrictive measures imposed against Beijing, a spokesman for the ministry said in the statement without elaborating. The statement comes after President Donald Trump said Thursday at an event at the White House that we just signed with China yesterday. A White House official later clarified that the administration and China had agreed to, quote, an additional understanding of a framework to implement the Geneva Agreement. Okay, we can leave that there. Let's go to Scott Bessent. Now we're cooking with gas. Sort of, I guess. Here's Bessent. I'm going to put him at 1.25.
This is what leadership looks like under President Trump. We've got peace deals, we got trade deals, we got tax deals. And in dealing with the world's second largest economy, we approached each other with mutual respect. President Trump set the table with a very important call with Party Chair Xi. They have a very good relationship. We had trade talks in Geneva toward moving toward the agreement in London. Part of the agreement was tariffs coming down and rare earth magnets starting to flow back to the U.S. They formed the core of a lot of our industrial base. They were not flowing as fast as previously agreed. President Trump and President Xi had a phone call, and then our teams met in London, ironed this out, and I am confident now that we, as agreed, the magnets will flow. In the meantime, we had put countermeasures versus the Chinese in place. We had held back the vital supplies for them. So what we're seeing here is a de-escalation under President Trump's leadership.
The magnets will flow, he says. So Trump's getting world peace deals, the sorts of deals that no one ever thought were possible. And he's doing all these trade deals too, removing the top-down centralized control structure over the world's economy. And now he's just going to have bilateral trade deals with major partners like China and India, opening up their billions of people, supposedly, to American goods. Sounds like major, major wins. Let's keep going. This is Ursula von der Leyen of the European Commission.
I briefed leaders on the current state of play in our trade talks with the United States. President Trump and I had a good discussion at the G7 summit in Canada. Back then, we agreed to speed up the work with a clear goal, an agreement before the 9th of July. Today, we received the latest US document for further negotiations. We are assessing it as we speak right now. So our message today is clear. We are ready for a deal. At the same time, we are preparing for the possibility that no satisfactory agreement is reached. This is why we consulted on a rebalancing list, and we will defend the European interest as needed. In short, all options remain on the table.
So she wants a deal. They're ready for a deal, and Trump might not be ready to give them a deal. He talked about how there are some countries he's not interested in working with, and it seems like it's got to be those ones. There might be some others that are, regime proxies and still too much under regime control, but it seems like he's talking about the European Union. This is from Apollo Academy, Torsten Slok, who is the chief economist. This is the very respected economist everyone's been hearing about over these past few days. And you may have even heard this mentioned in one of the questions from the White House press corps. Has Trump outsmarted everyone on tariffs? I'm just going to go through these quick 4 paragraphs, but then I think that there's a report attached to this. As we approach the Trump administration's self-imposed 90-day deadline for trade deals, markets are starting to speculate about what comes next. The longer uncertainty remains elevated, the more negative its impact on the economy, as shown in the chart below. Maybe the strategy is to maintain 30% tariffs on China and 10% tariffs on all other countries, and then give all countries 12 months to lower non-tariff barriers and to open up their economies to trade. Extending the deadline 1 year would give countries and U.S. domestic businesses time to adjust to the new world with permanently higher tariffs, and it would also result in an immediate decline in uncertainty, which would be positive for business planning, employment, and financial markets. This would seem like a victory for the world, and yet would produce $400 billion of annual revenue for U.S. taxpayers. Trade partners will be happy with only 10% tariffs, and U.S. tax revenue will go up. Maybe the administration has outsmarted all of us. Maybe the administration has outsmarted all of us. Have they outsmarted you, though? That's the real question. And maybe he's saying that a bit tongue-in-cheek. Many of them probably knew that what the administration was going to do would work, and they were just making excuses, arguing that it wouldn't work so that the policies wouldn't be in place. Because the policies, again, the tariffs, break down that centralized control system. All right, let's keep flying right through. So that was the trade section. Let's get back to Israel and Iran. Here we are. Now, this is reported and I would say unconfirmed. Tough to know what to make of this. Israel Hayam, or Hayam, Trump and Netanyahu's two-state vision, Gaza wars end, Abraham Accords expansion. Well, that's quite a lot. A four-way telephone conversation between United States President Donald Trump, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and Minister of Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer occurred directly after the American assault on Iran's nuclear installations. According to a source familiar with the discussion's substance, and again, source familiar, Israel Hayam learned that all participants expressed extreme enthusiasm regarding the B-2 bomber mission results and were experiencing what the source characterized as euphoria. Yet the tremendous satisfaction among the four leaders derived not merely from operational achievements, but also from their future strategic planning. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu aim to swiftly pursue fresh peace agreements with Arab states as part of Abraham Accords expansion. And this was from September of 2020, that picture that you see from the article. They reached consensus on these fundamental principles in general terms. They plan rapid implementation, beginning with Gaza warfare termination. So here are a list of priorities. Number one, Gaza hostilities will conclude within 2 weeks. Ending conditions will encompass 4 Arab nations, including Egypt and the United Arab Emirates, to administer the Gaza Strip, replacing the murderous Hamas terrorist organization. The remaining Hamas leadership will face exile to other countries while the hostages gain freedom. Multiple nations, number 2, will globally accept numerous Gaza inhabitants seeking emigration. Number 3, the Abraham Accords expansion will bring Syria, Saudi Arabia, and additional Arab and Muslim countries to recognize Israel and establish official relationships. Number 4, Israel will declare its willingness for future Palestinian conflict resolution under the two states concept, contingent upon Palestinian Authority reforms. And number 5, the United States will acknowledge limited Israeli sovereignty implementation in Judea and Samaria. And we will see how that goes. Those are major aspects of the peace process that we have talked about on this show and on Badlands for quite a while. And here it is happening. How could you know these sorts of things? Well, you could understand that the process in 2020 actually went much farther than we were told it went. Whatever happened in 2020, we were always told that those things actually, we can't get them quite finished. We can't quite finish the TikTok deal. We can't quite finish the Abraham Accords. We can't quite finish the China trade deal. It got blown up because of the very deadly pandemic. That was all China's fault. And so instead, we're seeing all of them implemented right now in the same way. Is it possible that they were put in place in 2020 and then for the entire time, a fake and illegitimate administration messed them all up and now they're right back in the same form this year? No, that's not possible. It's also not possible that that agreement was, that those terms were agreed to in the 13 or 14 days since Israel struck Iran, okay? And certainly not in the few days since Donald Trump put the end on that war or since he declared peace on, what was it, Tuesday? So, or maybe that was, I think it was Monday. There's no way any of that could have been agreed to that quickly. So we have to understand that it must have happened before. And it definitely had to happen before Israel struck Iran. So is it possible that a deal was in place and then acts of war were committed and then the deal didn't change at all? And the side who the acts of war were committed against was just like, yeah, okay, we'll still take the deal. Same deal. Yes, you've struck us and you've taken away our major leverage, which was our nuclear program, but we'll agree to the same terms. None of that makes any sense, okay? I don't know what to tell you. The nuke threat is a MacGuffin. Nuke threat is fake. And the deals were already in place. So all of this is a cover story for what is happening in the background. And what was happening in the background is something we could have known 5 years ago. Just saying. Let's keep going. This is the Times of Israel. Check out our boy Yuhu. Netanyahu agreed to end Gaza war within 2 weeks after U.S. strike on Iran. According to the outlet, and this is the same, they're reporting on the same thing, but Netanyahu, front and center here, this is the Times of Israel distributing this headline to their readership. It is Netanyahu doing this, okay? So does that mean there is a divide? Netanyahu wants the Gaza war to end in 2 weeks. Is he just faking out Donald Trump and everyone else? Really got to doubt that. Does that mean that all of Israel is following under Netanyahu's command? No, of course not. They've been trying from both sides to get rid of him for years, just like both sides have been trying to get rid of Donald Trump For years. In Israel. They have them in Europe too, but especially in Israel. When they say Israel is our greatest ally, Israel is the protectorate. That's what the neocons are here for. Okay? The United States, all its might, all its wealth, all the labor of its people go to protecting the global regime proxy state of Israel, which they set up as a Jewish ethno-state. So why is America protecting that? Because they're the only democracy in the Middle East. We need them to hold off Iran. Okay, well, they couldn't hold off Iran. In fact, they needed us to destroy Iran's fake nuclear threat. Just saying. Let's keep going. This is CNN from yesterday. Details emerge of secret. I think I might have glitched out again there for a second. Having a bit of trouble with the old StreamYard, or maybe it's my computer. My computer's being a pain in the ass the last couple of days. And it's relatively new, which is really annoying. Okay, CNN. Details emerge of secret diplomatic efforts to restart Iran talks. The Trump administration has discussed possibly helping Iran access as much as $30 billion to build a civilian energy-producing nuclear program, easing sanctions and freeing up billions of dollars in restricted Iranian funds, all part of an intensifying attempt to bring Tehran back to the negotiating table, four sources familiar with the matter said. All right? So a civilian nuclear energy program. And we have been talking about that as well. Of course, they're going to be allowed to do that. Of course, they're going to be allowed to do that. I mean, what in the world would we possibly be thinking if we were to try to say, no, you can't use the best forms of energy? We're just not going to allow your country to do that because the Israelis have told us for 30 years that you're trying to make a magical bomb to destroy them. One more from Bannon.
Here. And it just magically on the very day that President Trump reaffirms with the second briefing, hey, total annihilation, total obliteration, we're done. Steve Witkoff's talking about letting the mullahs sell oil to the Chinese Communist Party, which, as you know, in the war room, we say that's verboten because we ain't fans of the mullahs. We think they're bad guys, and the way to do this is to get the Persians to overthrow them, and the way to do that is choke them down on economics. But, hey, President Trump's, this is his deal. This is his deal. He's putting it together, and he's definitely playing five-dimension chess, so good on you. Whatever you're going to do, President Trump, is going to be fine. But there's going to be a reset of that. You can say.
There's going to be a reset of the Israel. I keep thinking I'm glitching out, and you can tell me if I am or not. I think that I am. So he's saying there's going to be a reset of the Israel relationship there. He's talking about Donald Trump playing 5G, and he's talking about the war room expressing these positions that aren't going to align with Donald Trump because they have their certain beliefs. But whatever Trump's doing, it's his deal. Got to support him. He knows what he's doing. So they're on board. Isn't it amazing how it all comes together? Even when before he was saying things that would make it seem like it wasn't going to come together. It's crazy, isn't it? How does it happen? How does it happen? Let's go to Defense Minister Katz.
Minister Israel Katz says he's instructed the military to prepare an enforcement plan, as they're describing it, against Iran following the 12-day air war. They've put this statement out in the past few moments, saying the plan includes maintaining Israel's air superiority, preventing nuclear advancement and missile production, and responses to Iran for supporting terrorist activities against Israel.
So Israel Katz seems like the guy that is keeping this going and is taking the leading role on the Israeli side to partner with the neocons in pushing their side of the narrative while Bibi Netanyahu is on the Trump side. Okay. And I know that my good friend, Ghost of Base Patrick Henry, sees these things differently. That's fine. We'll figure out in the future. Maybe he's right. Maybe I'm right. Maybe both of us are right and wrong in certain ways. It doesn't matter. Okay. I'm analyzing this through my lens. He's analyzing it through his. And, you know, the chips will fall where they may. We have no control over it. But it's good to have multiple viewpoints from people who are seeing things largely from the same perspective with the same goals in terms of the America First agenda and how these situations should ultimately play out. And the fact that we are not, that this ultimately is not our business. This is Donald Trump today with a quick response just to let everybody know where things stand.
If the intelligence reports conclude that Iran can enrich uranium to a level that concerns you, would you consider bombing the country again?
Without question, absolutely.
Have you had any...
So Trump has bombed before and will bomb again. This is another extraordinarily long post right before I got on, and we've got it like 3 minutes after this. We're almost there. So Donald J. Trump from Truth Social this afternoon. Why would the so-called supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, of the war-torn country of Iran, say so blatantly and foolishly that he won the war with Israel, when he knows that statement is a lie? It is not so. As a man of great faith, he is not supposed to lie. His country was decimated. His 3 evil nuclear sites were obliterated. And I knew exactly where he was sheltered and would not let Israel or the armed forces, by far the greatest and most powerful in the world, terminate his life. I saved him from a very ugly and ignominious death. And he does not have to say, "Thank you, President Trump." In fact, in the final act of the war, I demanded that Israel bring back a large group of planes, which were heading directly to Tehran, looking for a big day, perhaps the final knockout. Tremendous damage would have ensued, and many Iranians would have been killed. It was going to be the biggest attack of the war by far. During the last few days, I was working on the possible removal of sanctions and other things, which would have given a much better chance to Iran for a full, fast, and complete recovery, I think is what he wanted to say. The sanctions are biting. But no, instead I get hit with a statement of anger, hatred, and disgust, and immediately dropped all work on sanction relief and more. Iran has to get back to the world order flow, or things will only get worse for them. They are always so angry, hostile, and unhappy. And look at what it has gotten them. A burned out, blown up country with no future, a decimated military, a horrible economy, and death all around them. They have no hope, and it will only get worse. I wish the leadership of Iran would realize that you often get more with honey than you do with vinegar. Peace, with exclamation points. And so we shall see. I would suspect that is nothing more than a narrative leverage attempt, and that is no slight against Donald Trump, but I think that he is just doing a leverage play there, and we will see a deal with Iran very soon, hopefully next week, and with Israel too. Iran and Israel signing an Abraham Accord would be monumental, and I think that we will see that. I don't know if it'll be the first thing. Maybe it'll take some time. It'll be down the line, but I think we will sooner or later see that. Now, let's get out of here on some fun notes. This is little water slide man, Kim Jong-un. All right, we can leave that behind. The audio people are like, what the hell has happened to this show? So that is Little Rocket Man advertising a new beach resort that can host 20,000 guests. Okay, massive beach resort. Here is Donald Trump suggesting that Kim Jong-un do that years ago.
Exploding their cannons into the ocean, right? I said, boy, look at that. Wouldn't that make a great condo behind? And
talking about North Korean beaches and wanting to develop property there. Amazing. And it looks like that's what we're seeing. So Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, India, and Pakistan, all of these pariah states, as we've been indoctrinated to believe, are now being brought back into the fold. And as Trump says, brought back into the world order. Multipolar world order? Certainly not the new world order, the global regime's rules-based liberal international world order. So, hey, welcome, pariah states. All of your dictators are much funnier than we ever thought before. Turns out they're all hilarious. Maduro, can't wait till we get to the Maduro thing. Maduro, Kim Jong-un, Putin, awesome. Just Kim Jong-un's summer bromance with Vladimir Putin last year, amazing stuff. Gotta love it. I love to see it. Okay, this is the last clip, and then we are going to get on out of here. This is Donald Trump. As soon as I can find it, there we are. There we are.
you know, it's the second time it happened to me. In 2016, I won on the border. I fixed it in about 3 months. It was beautiful.
This is from yesterday, by the way.
And they wouldn't let me talk about the border. Sir, nobody wants to hear about the border. But we're going to talk about it anyway. Right, Tom Holman? We're talking about it anyway. So we have a big number of dollars that's coming here because we want to keep it that way and we want to keep it fixed. And a record number of deportations. We're bringing criminals out by the thousands. Nobody can even imagine. They let people in that were murderers. 11,888 murderers, gang members, people from mental institutions, and insane asylum. You know what that is? That's insane asylum. That's a mental institution on steroids. During the campaign, I talk about the late, great Hannibal Lecter. Do you know who that is, Hannibal Lecter? Silence of the Lambs. I'd talk about it and the fake news would go crazy. Why does he keep mentioning? Well, because we won in a landslide. That's why they don't want to have Hannibal in our midst. And the day I signed this bill into law, almost every major promise made in the 2024 campaign already will have become a promise kept. And that's very important. Promises made, promises kept.
There it is. It's happening. Promises from the first term, promises from the second term, promises from the third term. All made, all being kept. And we are seeing them come together at an incredible pace and a quickening pace at that. I expect we're going to have a big week next week leading into the 4th of July because the president is going to want to have some big events to coincide with the nation's birthday party and the official beginning of that 250th year leading up to the end of the birthday party on July 4th, 1776. So as for next week, I'm going to do an episode on Tuesday. I'm going to try to get in a subscriber stream either Wednesday evening or maybe on Thursday. And then Friday is the 4th, so no show there toward the end of the week. I will let you know next week at some point. It might be a little bit on the fly, but I'm going to try to do two episodes next week. And with that, I don't think that I've missed any. Oh, John Henry Bonzo, slipping a Rumble rant in there at the last minute. Thanks, Chris. Enjoy your weekend. I hope everyone is comfy. Be well, and God bless you all. God bless you too, my friend. And thank you for your consistent support over all this time. I see we also had something of a troll in the chat. And then one of the funniest things ever, he wrote, WTF, this guy is making sense. I may have trolled the wrong stream. Oops. Well, I suppose there's no higher compliment than that. Checking on Substack. I hope you guys all had a good time. And the things I was saying made sense. Who knows? You never know how early someone is coming to the show. If you are on Substack or Rumble and YouTube and you are not subscribed to the channel, if this is like the first time you've heard the show or whatever, please go ahead and subscribe. If you are watching on any of those platforms, please hit the thumbs up. At least in theory, that will help at some point. And otherwise, I will be back on Tuesday at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic, and Joe Biden was never president.
Well,
what?
You know who I am, don't you?
Well, you ain't Fiona Apple, and if you ain't Fiona Apple, I don't give a rat's ass.
What's wrong with being an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times? What do you think, Max?
Do you want to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times?
Yeah, I think I'd like to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times.
It's not true. It's more true than I would perhaps prefer.
Can we stop this cruel game and allow the boy to keep one shred of dignity? For God's sakes! I can't stand to see him in all this pain! You vicious bastards! Let him move in with you! Is it so bad to see somebody happy? So just let him move in! For the love of God, let the boy move in with you! Good Lord!
And I will not let you down.
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
What? In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com, and for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon. Down on the range.